All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of the New Canaan Planning and Zoning Commission for May 22nd, 2024. My name is Krista Nielsen. Dan Radman, our chair, is unable to attend this evening, so I'm filling in for him. Just like all our meetings since COVID, tonight's meeting will be a hybrid meeting, which means there'll be people on Zoom and people in the room. So we both have commissioners on Zoom and in the room. We might have applicants or members of the public on Zoom as well. Just so everyone knows that, tonight we're going to begin in regular meeting mode to hear an administrative item left over from last month. It should be pretty quick. We will not be taking public comment during regular meeting mode. Then we'll switch into the public hearing mode. We have two applications tonight that will be part of the public hearing. And be advised, we're not hearing item 3 or 4 on the agenda, 884 Smith Ridge Road. So if anyone is here for the Smith Ridge Road application, that is not being heard this evening. When we do have public hearings on items, we'll first, as the commission, hear from the applicant, ask questions, and then we'll take comment from members of the public. If you are interested in speaking, raise your hand. If you're in the room, if you're on Zoom, raise your virtual hand. And when you're recognized, you'll come up here to the podium. And the thing you need to remember to do is state your name and address for the record so that we know who you are. Once we've heard from all the members of the public, we'll decide if it's appropriate to close the application or not. And if we close the application, we can deliberate on it later in the evening when we switch back to regular meeting mode. And that's when we'll deliberate back on the closed applications and any administrative matters. So let's do the roll call. Dan Radman is absent. Krista Nielsen, present. Kent Turner.
Here.
John Chris.
Here.
Art Cassavant.
Here.
John Engel. Here. Herring is not here yet, but may show up. Paul Knag.
Here.
Alan Swerdlow.
Here.
Tom Benton.
Here.
Christina Larson. And Eric Knowles.
Here.
So the first item on the agenda is 32 Elm Street. Upon application of Mark Demerel, authorized agent for 32 Elm Street LLC, owners for a site plan application or site plan approval pursuant to section 6.12 to allow a restaurant in the retail A zone at 32 Elm Street, map T, block 66, lot 97. This is an administrative items. Commissioner, you may remember that last month we heard this and asked the applicant to come back with a clarification on a few items. So this is just being handled administratively tonight. It's not a full site plan application. Who do we have here to speak? Thank you. Oh,
Please just make sure the mic's on.
and one other thing, Mr. Knowles, I'm seating you for Mr. Radman. And actually, Mr. Benton, I'll seat you for Mr. Herring unless he comes in.
Press the button.
You need to press the button on the microphone to make it have a green light. Nope, it's got to be a green light. So it's just got a button that says.
Push.
push.
There we
you
go. Okay.
Now you're good.
We're here tonight to propose a very simple modification to the existing first floor level storefront at 32 Elm Street. And that modification involves reinstalling existing elements of the storefront by moving on the Elm Street side, the door will come forward 20 inches and the glass would then align with the facade above. And as you can see on the jamb next to the brick, that's as far as we would come forward. That's our, if you can imagine the glass just doing this. So we're bringing the whole thing forward. Same thing in the back. We have a pocket with splayed glass going back. We just want to bring that door forward, the door, the frame, the jamb for the window forward, and align it with the existing glass. And that will align with the facade above. The walls will remain the same height as they are now, which is 21 inches, both front and back. The clear opening on the front is 41 inches, and we would maintain the ADA sill. once that's built, then we would propose to cover the old metal parts with a material called AZEK. It's and be white and look like wood. And we then had a glass contractor come down and talk to us on site to take a look at our ideas. And he said very simple for him to do. He does it all the time. And so that was encouraging. I then called the New Canaan Building Department and asked for Brian Platt and spoke with John to discover whether we would be obligated to comply with IECC 2021 codes and what did he think of our idea? He said, it's fine. You know, we don't have to worry about the IECC 2021 since we're just modifying an existing storefront. In the back where we had the ADA bathrooms, we're proposing a clear glass with a shade behind it on both sides. But on the ADA bath side, there would be a wall with access panels. So we could screen out any shadows that would be seen at night and also allow us to open up, put the shade up, wash the window, keep the place clean. And that's it. You can see both our photo reel. The last time we were here, we did not have these photo renderings. So here you have what we propose this modification to look like.
So let me just ask a question first, and then I'll open it up to the other commissioners. The ADA bathroom in the back that you're saying has a wall with an access panel and then the window in front of it. I assume most of the time the shade will never be up, that you're looking at this wall inside the window. Is that the intention?
The shade would be
Down
all
the
yeah,
time.
all the time.
Because
Yeah,
it would
yeah,
be
for
weird to look
privacy.
in
Yeah.
A
obviously.
window and just
Yeah.
see a wall.
Mhm.
Is my
Right.
point.
Yes.
But I am happy you're keeping the window. Other questions, commissioners?
Commissioner Cruz, are you planning to have any planters or anything in front on either of these?
Architectural drawings?
Yes, any planters, like a planter box with flowers in it or something, many,
Well, we haven't
stores do.
discussed a planter box.
excuse me?
We haven't discussed a planter box as part of the design.
Okay, thank you.
Although the one that Andre has put up in front of Dolce looks quite nice.
I would just suggest that if you do that, I'm not against it, but there is a certain amount of space you need in the sidewalk for ADA access and such, so,
Yeah, I guess we'll make it consistent with the other buildings around it. Yeah.
thank you.
Commissioners, are we good, or do we have other questions?
We're good.
Yep.
We're good. So Sarah, we can go ahead and vote.
Correct. You
On
could
this
vote on
item.
this now.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second,
All right. Any further discussion?
I think it's a nice, this Commissioner Cruz, I think it's a nice design. Simple.
I think they also answered the questions from last time, so.
Okay. So let's go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Turner,
I vote yes.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
Mr. Cassavant,
Yes.
Mr. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Knag,
Yes.
Mr. Swerdlow,
Yes.
Mr. Knowles,
Yes.
and Mr. Benton.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So it's unanimous. Thank you for taking the time to come back. to
Wonderful.
us.
Thank you very much.
At this rate, we'll be done at 7:30.
New record.
Thank
I'll call Dan in Norway and tell him I beat his record. All right, so now we're moving into the public hearing portion of the meeting. Like I said earlier, we'll have two applications here, the first of which is 672 Oak Ridge. Upon application of David Rucci, Lampert, Tui, and Rucci, authorized agent for the Kelly Family Trust, owners for a site plan and special permit approval pursuant to sections 6.4.G.1, 6.4.G.2, and 6.5.B.4 to allow grading in excess of 1,000 cubic yards, soil disturbance over 10,000 square feet, and to install retaining walls in excess of 4 feet, including one along the westerly property line that will fluctuate between 3 feet and 9.8 feet in the 4-acre zone at 672 Oak Ridge, map 33, block 32, lot 128. Commissioners, I just want to remind you, before we hear this, of something that I was reminded of myself today, which is that we changed our retaining wall regulations last November. I had forgotten that we did that. So now we require a special permit for retaining walls in any zoning district over 4 feet. So just make sure you're looking at the newest version of the regulations. They're on page 154 of our zoning ordinance.
Madam Chair, I'm going to recuse myself from this application.
Okay, Chris is recused. Eric, Mr. Knowles, I'll seat you for Dan Radman, and Tom, I'll seat you for Chris Herring again. Okay.
Good
Mr.
evening, Ms. Nielsen. David Rucci from Lamperture and Rucci in New Canaan. This evening, I'm here with the applicants. Laura and her husband, Chris, may be joining us, Kelly, shortly. Landscape design and really the project designer of this, Alan Broadbent, is with me podium today. And then Lynn DeAndrea and Adam Serini are on Zoom, who did the engineering. I plan on just running through this quickly as far as what our presentation is, and then I'll sort of step back and have Alan describe how he came up with the plan, and then Len and Adam as far as the site plan work on here. And as we talked about, as you read earlier, what we're really looking for today are 2 sets of retaining walls that we want to put up on the property. And then we're obviously bringing in soil that's going to be held back from the property. So a lot of this has to do with that particular plan. And it started essentially when the applicant, this property sits on the corner of Country Club Road and Oak. And essentially what happens is there's a drop off on the topography that kind of runs down that second part of Country Club Road across the street to the west. You'll see here, this is the property is the way it looks today. You'll see that there's a stone wall opening here. I'm sorry, a retaining wall here for the walkout. And then in the rear, this is the longer wall that sits along about 12 feet to 39 feet from the westerly property line. This is just a picture from the front. This is a house that's under construction right now. It's about a 5.6 acre piece of property. Once again, it's on the corner. This is the front of the property that faces Oak. This is the corner of the property. Essentially, as you look down Country Club Road, you can see it starts to drop off even from the top here. And then this is the second entrance that comes off Country Club Road into the property itself. And this is looking back up the street from Country Club Road towards Oak. And you can see that you store this kind of at the bottom of the property. You can see here the grade change as it comes down. And that's important because that's really essentially why we're here today, is to put in these retaining walls to try and do 2 things. Number one, we're trying to create a recreational backyard for the Kellys, because right now it sort of just falls down off the back of the property. And the second thing that we're trying to do is to alleviate the drainage that's coming down the hill from this particular property to other properties on Country Club Road. This is that back drop off that I just wanted to show you as part of the initial part of it. You can see it's a pretty steep drop. It's about 17 feet from the back of the property to where we're actually proposing to put the retaining wall to the west. And this is just kind of a larger view of it. It's sometimes hard to see from the maps that you have in front of you. Here's the topography map. We're on page 9 right now. Once again, you're seeing a drop here from about 202 to about 184 in the back. And this is our plan, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail. But you'll see the first item that we're asking for is this walkout area, which is where the garage comes in. The basement walkout comes in. And then the rear wall here, which is what we're proposing to sort of bring back up and create this recreational space in the back of the property. I'm going to come back to the site plan when Len's ready, so I'm just going to skip through these. So here's that walkout area that we were talking about earlier. The walls are going to be in on this area and they are above 4 feet. This is looking back up towards Onoke Road from that particular spot of where the walkout's going to be. And this is just a larger dimension of how the walkout's going to work and the way it's been regraded on the sides and the way the walls are going to come. The retaining walls are going to hold back this dirt. The west retaining wall, and like I said, I'll go back through with the site plan and with the development team so that they can explain exactly how they came up with this. But I just thought it would be a good idea just sort of get us all familiarized with the site before we get to that. So here's the west retaining wall. Now, this is the back of the property right now, and you can see looking north. Here's your sort of screening to the north side of the property, and then you can see the drop off. I've got a couple different pictures of the drop off. Fortunately, we have a lot of screening right now on the property, which is not coming down. This is once again looking sort of northwest. This is once again the rear. This is looking down. You've seen this picture once before. And then we're back to this sort of plan here, which I'm going to skip through. And this is the wall itself, which I'm going to ask Alan Broadbent to go through as far as the wall that we're proposing to build on this. I think that what I'll do now is just have Alan, once again, here's just some pictures of the screening that exists on the property from the landscape perspective. And this is looking back towards Country Club Road. So the wall is going to sort of start in this particular area back here. And you'll see that once again, we have some nice screening on both the south side of the property, looking south on the property. I think I'll let Alan take it from this particular slide because this is sort of the development of the property and how he went about thinking about creating this space in the back and bringing in the retaining wall itself. So if Alan, I could just turn over to you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Alan Broadbent, landscape architect with Broadbent Design Studio. Wonderful to be here tonight. As Dave has mentioned, our office was engaged by the client, Chris and Laura, to come up with a way to compose this site to fit a new build, new residence onto the site, and to maximize the site's potential and make it a beautiful and wonderful place for them to raise a family. As we began our process, we started to look at the existing conditions on the site, and we noted immediately that there's a beautiful stand of maple and oak trees in the southeast corner, which is Country Club and Onoke, where they meet, and that area would remain as sort of this glade area with lawn beneath it. We noted that in the back of the property, on the western property line, there's an existing fully mature screen of Norway spruce, river birch, and other mixed evergreens within that space. And then we noted that on the south of the property, there's an old orchard with a small shed, and that space would want to be preserved exactly as it stands today. So seeing that those spaces were already in beautiful form, we looked to the area immediately surrounding the proposed residence to see how we might craft a space that would be more usable for outdoor recreation and would provide a flat and safe area for their children. To the north of the proposed residence is another untouched area of woodland that has many generation type maples and oaks, and that has been identified as an area that would be preserved in perpetuity as that sort of space. Looking at the back of the property, we were faced with a very tough challenge. 18 feet of grade change from the back door to the property line. How do you create a flat space for a family when you have grades upwards of 20% from the back door down to the property line? So we come tonight with obviously a plan that's in front of you, but it's important to mention that this plan represents probably 7 iterations of exploration, of trying to discover the ideal and optimal solution to provide a flat area on the property. As we looked at this, we first started looking at the opportunity of grading from 10 feet behind the western property line, which would be allowed per New Canaan regs. We could grade up to 20% within the setback area and 25% thereafter. And that had some potential, but it had 2 significant downsides. The first was that something like that would require the removal of the existing mature evergreen screening trees, which we had never considered wanting to do. The second is that doing that actually didn't deliver much flat area, because by the time you managed a 20% slope, you were almost to the back door. That's what the slopes already are. So it doesn't really achieve a whole lot. We looked at a few other options that involved varying different heights and locations of retaining walls. So we looked at walls that were 4 foot and under, placing them 10 feet from the property line. We looked at walls that are 4 feet and under, placing them 20 feet from the property line. And we began this sort of algebraic equation of trying to find what would be the most sensible thing to propose on a property like this that could preserve the highest quantity of existing mature trees, but that could still deliver a meaningful area of at least a half an acre of flat lawn. That was the goal. And so as we went through the calculus, we identified that surprisingly, the wall needed to sit 40 feet from the property line, which is not where we thought we would land. It's not often that we come to our clients and say, by the way, we'd like you to preserve 40 feet of space, which we're not going to touch. But our clients were open to that and said, explain to us why you're proposing that. So we showed them how the existing evergreen screening can be maintained if we pull the wall in to about 40 feet from the property line. The corollary to that, though, is to make a meaningfully flat area, the wall needs to be a bit taller. So we'll extend the wall up to its maximum of 9.8 feet for one portion of the wall and locate it 40 feet from the property line. And in so doing, we can preserve the existing mature screen. This plan seemed to really hold water. And so we began to develop our plan with this in mind of placing the wall in this position and looking at how we could maximize the flat area. I should back up for a second and mention that initially we were looking at wall heights of 12 feet, but that didn't seem like it would be entirely necessary if we could take 3 feet out of the equation. So 30 feet from the back of the proposed residence, we have a set of lawn stairs that bring us down 3 feet, essentially terracing the property from a shoulder space immediately surrounding the residence down to the flat recreation lawn below. What this does is that it makes the aesthetic of the property feel more naturalized within its surrounding, and it also minimizes the height of the wall to only what would be necessary to increase the grade to a comfortable flat area. So as we worked through that, we discovered that we could achieve grades of about 3% on the lawn area while preserving the existing mature screen at the back of the property, and all the while decreasing the quantity and volume of stormwater that flows downhill. We will have an opportunity tonight to hear from Len DeAndrea, our engineer. This property and the 2 properties below it have a history of drainage challenges. And so part of our program was to find ways to decrease the amount and speed of water that would travel towards those properties. As we looked at the optimal placement of the wall and found that the placement was about 40 feet from the back property line, we then began to explore the various types of wall systems that could be used to achieve this effect. It's easy to quickly jump to the default wall system, which is a concrete reinforced retaining wall. Whether or not it's stuccoed or clad with stone, this type of wall is a known entity and is used in many different places. It does, however, require an extreme amount of excavation, hundreds of yards of concrete, and thousands of pounds of steel. So we started looking at this thinking, is this really the right solution to build this kind of a wall, knowing that already 80% of the proposed wall would be obscured by existing screening trees, and that we could achieve 100% screening if we added a few more trees and shrubs. So what other wall systems are out there that we can find that would be more efficient, more value conscious, and have a lighter hand on the earth? We looked at retaining wall systems that are built of segmented concrete block, systems that use geogrid mat reinforcing to hold back into the earth and that have greater drainage benefits to the project. And so we arrived at the wall that's proposed to you today, which is a unilock segmented concrete retaining wall that allows for this wall to be built without the kind of volume and mass that a concrete retaining wall requires, and with the drainage benefits that this wall delivers. This wall also is very flexible in terms of altering the height. Our wall goes from 2 feet tall to 4 to 6 up to 9.8, and then back to 5 to 3 and eventually to 0 at the northeastern side of the corner. So all of those things were considered as we developed this. We then went to the next step of figuring out how we would screen the remaining small sections of wall that could be visible. We made several site visits, we took drone photos, and we even reached out to the neighbor to the west, and he was open to having us come to his home and meet with him and allow us to see the views that would be had from his side of the property. so that we could pinpoint any remaining holes in the existing screening that would need to be filled. Once we identified those, we then recommended to our clients that we propose screening, substantial amount of screening, which is a combination of native dark American thuya, arborvitae, for those who don't know, and Norway spruce, as well as skip laurels in the shadier areas that are a little bit harder for native evergreens to establish. The combination of these dozens of trees and shrubs effectively completes the obscurity of the wall. So in any location on either property, the wall would be hidden from view. And by so doing, the wall becomes a mechanical device that isn't really part of the aesthetic scene at all. And the continuity of the bucolic green layering that is very much what the language of this property is maintained. From above, we don't see the wall. From below, we would not see the wall. And from Mr. Perret's property to the west, we also would not see the wall. One of the ancillary benefits of this whole proposal is that stormwater will be slowed and controlled and directed. And by doing so, we'll not have to have Mr. Perret rely on a series of small berms and things that he's had to, over the years, establish on his property to try to manage water. And we believe that there's significant reason to do all of these things, improving the property for our clients, raising the property value of our client's property, increasing by that same token the value of the property surrounding, because they're all improved and maximized to their optimum potential. I think I'll stop at that point, and perhaps we should go to the site plan and let the engineers talk specifically about stormwater.
Good evening. My name is Leonard DeAndrea, Connecticut professional engineer. Our firm, DeAndrea Surveying Engineering, PC, provided land surveying and site engineering services. And to my left is Adam Serini. He was the brains of the design. He did all the analysis. And we came up with the design that's presented before you in this slide. But Attorney Rucci, if you could back up to slide 9, I'd like to just quickly start with the existing conditions. Okay, very good. There were a couple of letters I know that were submitted from Attorney Green that talked about an original design back in 2008 that was implemented to help solve drainage concerns, problems on the downgradient neighbors. We certainly recognize that, and we documented that, surveyed it into our existing conditions plan. So we're fully aware of what that initial plan was. Now you can proceed on to the site design plan. Okay, so this plan here shows the latest design, which includes the retaining walls and the walkout basement. But the background of this is our drainage system that was designed to accommodate the larger footprint of the home, and also more in keeping with the design requirements of the town of New Canaan. In that southwest corner, when we walked it, we recognized that there was some sort of a capturing system, which turned out to be a bit of a curtain drain. And that's the thin line right where your cursor is pointing now. But we also noticed it had not been well maintained. So we knew that we had to address that in our design going forward. So the new design includes a significantly sized infiltration array, right more or less in the middle of the site there, that large rectangle. And that does two things. It provides a little bit more down to your, here you go. It provides first flush control and infiltration, water quality. And so it's a retention system. In addition to that, it's a detention system. And then that whatever exceeds that capacity gets released in a controlled fashion so that we have decreases in the peak rate of discharge. We also added then a rain garden in the southwest corner, something that wasn't there before, to get more volume control and more water quality. And of course, we're rebuilding the curtain drain. And one more thing of interest here is it is a bigger footprint. It also has a deeper foundation. So there was some concern, I think, in the second letter of Attorney Green that mentions groundwater. Well, we're not exacerbating that. And in fact, in this situation, because we have a deeper foundation, and that footprint of the foundation will be intercepting whatever excess groundwater there is, and that is directed via pipe to an existing stormwater system in Country Club Road. And I should say, in keeping with the McCord earlier plan of 2008, that's what his design did as well. They took some yard drains, some roof runoff, a sump pump discharge, all that also routed to the Country Club Road system, but without any further treatments, no polishing and no detention or retention. And then the new design, again, what did this do for us? You level out the backyard, it just simply slows down the runoff. If you slow down that sheet flow, that runoff that hits the lawn, and remember, we're talking about the lawn now because we're capturing the house itself, it gives it more chance to infiltrate and allows you to be more stable. I think as engineers, what we always have a problem with, if you just decide, I'm going to take this level lawn to a point and then just drop it down as quickly as we can and hope that our landscape architect can provide the proper coverage so we don't have continued erosion and a continued maintenance problem. This solves that problem and at the same time creates a very usable rear yard. So we're pleased with this. You'll also note that the wall itself is slightly higher than the last contour of that sloped area or the leveled out area. Again, that all helps to encourage infiltration. So from our stormwater management point of view, we think this is a fantastic design and it will do many things to further alleviate the runoff that goes from one property to the next. And remember, we have sheet flow currently that goes down gradient from one property to the next, and finally into the pond. And this is doing a lot to control that, slow it down, and also to divert quite a bit of it into the Country Club Road system. So I don't think I have any more to state on that. And of course, Adam and I can answer any questions you may have.
Would you like to ask any questions now, or do you want me to finish
Why don't you
moving
go
through?
ahead and finish, and then we'll
Okay.
ask all the questions.
So as far as the special permit criteria that we look at, we believe that with this lot, it's a larger lot in the zone. Obviously, it's a 4-acre zone. We have over 5.6 acres on the property. So this particular development, these particular retaining walls are not going to be anything different than what could be on these properties today. We believe that they're appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish, and they also really serve as a additional an additional slowing down of this water, and is going to really help not only this particular piece of property but everybody down on Country Club Road from that. We the first plans, a couple of plans that we had that Alan talked about a little bit, we have a lot of screening on this property to begin with, but they've added almost another 25 trees and shrubs to the property. I mean, the whole design of this wall was that we wanted no one to see it. So to a certain extent, it wasn't how the wall was going to look. It was how no one was going to be able to see the wall. So that's what the proposal was. That's what the landscape design team wanted to do. And we don't want anyone to see the wall either, either from any of our neighbors' properties. And we think that we've achieved that to this point with this new plan. And none of the driveways are going to change on this property. They're going to still continue to serve a single-family house. There's no wetlands on this property. And we believe that we've increased the value of not only this particular property, but all the properties in and around us, based on the fact that we've been able to control this water runoff on the property, something that's been a problem, I guess, in this neighborhood for some time now. As far as the, obviously we've received the neighbor letters that came in today. We'd been in conversations with the Peretz. Obviously, we approached the Peretz when we put the application in initially. So we've spoken with him, Alan's been speaking with him since, mid-April or so. And the plan was he wants to make sure that his property values are protected, that this wall is not going to be any sort of detrimental effect to his property. I think that I'll let him and his attorney speak, but obviously they were, pleased with the screening. I think they were pleased that we contacted them to talk about this with them ahead of time. And we've met with them a number of times, and we've done, the plans changed since the original plan that went in back in April for the April hearing. So, we're still still in conversations with them to a certain extent. They had hired McCord, Tom Nelson from McCord. We were anticipating a letter from Tom. We had some conversations with him earlier about some things that he thought might be helpful. Some of those things have been incorporated into the plan, but we never received an actual letter from him indicating what he thought might be more appropriate or something that might help. Obviously, Deandra and McCord are both, high-end firms. They work together and they certainly respect each other's work. So I don't think there is anything that McCord could necessarily suggest to us that would not be something that we would look at pretty hard and probably take on as something for this particular project as far as the engineering goes. We meet the drainage policy for the town of New Canaan. It's been looked at by by Maria, both these particular walls, and she does not have any issues with it. We're very pleased with this application. We think it was really well put together and really well thought out. As far as Attorney Green's letter, I
just want to jump in real quick about
Yeah.
Attorney Green's letter. We didn't get it until 4:45 this afternoon, so it's not on the website. So the commission would not have seen it at all. So just wanted to make that.
Well, I'll address it regardless. Attorney Green was concerned and his neighbor was concerned. Now they're a property away, so they're not technically within 100 feet of this application. So, they don't have like standing in the application, but
Orient us, because the survey only identifies Perrette.
he's below Perrette.
Further west.
Who?
Like-
Further west,
How
Attorney
far
Green's
does
client.
Perrette go, for example? Is there somebody else adjacent to Perrette? Because, and who does Attorney Green represent?
The Russells.
And they're not adjacent, or they?
No. So if you look on this plan here, this is slide 37. You'll see the Perrette house is what I'm pointing to here, and this is the Russell's house down here.
And who is to the north?
That's Ovenoak. Oh, to the north? Have not heard from them. But nonetheless, the design is to help everybody on the street. So we don't have an issue with Attorney Green and the Russells coming to inquire about this to make sure that everything is being done properly. It's not something that we're, concerned about, because in the end, what we're trying to do is to alleviate this water situation. So we have responded to that. We have not heard back from the McCord yet. But as I said, we're very pleased with the plan. We think it's been really well thought out. It's got tremendous amount of screening existing. We're adding a bunch of more screening, which will continue to hide this wall. And we think that in the end, this is a great asset to the neighborhood as far as what it will do for not only drainage, but this wall being screened, and it will create an area for the applicants to enjoy instead of having a steep drop off on the back of their property. So I'm happy to answer any more questions today. I don't know if you want to hear from anyone else first. Or if you want to talk, or if you want to ask any questions of the engineer.
So I think we do have some questions.
Yes.
so.
Mr. Benton.
Commissioner Benton here. From the neighbor perspective, you described they won't be able to see it. In the wintertime when the leaves are down, will they have a view of the wall?
I can address that. So the existing screening that is there is predominantly evergreen screening. It's overwhelmingly Norway spruce, very dense. And the proposed screening is dark American arborvitae, which is evergreen, additional Norway spruce, also evergreen, and skip laurels, also broadleaf evergreen. So the concept is, in fact, in our plan, we note that a small stand of forsythia should be replaced with skip laurel for that very concern. When Mr. Perrette and I walked the property, he astutely pointed out that although it is screened in this one angle now, when the forsythia drops its leaves, it wouldn't be. So we have looked at that and addressed that. And so the answer to the question is that deciduous material isn't part of what we're considering screening. There are many additional deciduous trees, both before and after the evergreens, that in the summer add another layer of screening. But even take those all away, the screening is still intact.
With that said, is the neighbor content with the screening plan?
I had a call with a neighbor about a week and a half ago, and he expressed that he liked our new plan with the additional screening that was in coordination with our meeting that he and I had about 4 weeks ago. Yes.
If I may, one more. I know you described it as it was a 12-foot high wall. You terraced it down a bit. It's about 9 feet. Was there consideration to actually terracing the wall? So you had 4 feet, you had 5 feet of wall, some space to plant, and then 4 feet of wall closer to the house, so that to the neighbor's side, they're only seeing a 4-foot wall?
We looked at a number of different wall compositions, including various terraces. As you know, one of the challenges with terraces, you have to have double the space of the height of the wall in between them. And so with our effort of maximizing horizontal flat space, we decided not to go that direction and instead pulled the wall further from the property line. We had started our process looking at 10 feet from the property line, 4-foot wall, 8-foot space, another 4-foot wall. But we actually felt that that was worse than what we're presenting today, which is to have a generous buffer and then a single wall to accomplish the entire goal.
And protecting the tree line, or is any part of this wall inside the drip line of the existing trees?
No, it is not within the drip line of any of the existing evergreen trees. There are 2 river birch that are overgrown and shading out the evergreen trees that would be required to be removed by the placement of this wall, but we would have recommended the removal anyway because they're actually destroying the evergreen screen. They're shading out the western side.
This is Commissioner Pinar.
Microphone on.
If I can get the mic on. There we go. So you indicated that the neighbors, that you would be pleased to confer with the neighbor's consultant and that you would be inclined to agree to reasonable proposals that might be forthcoming. So where would that leave us as a commission? Is this something that where we should wait until another meeting and then allow you time to go through that process before completing this?
Sure. Let me speak to the first part of it and I'll let Dave answer the second. So the first part is we started our process in mid-April, convening a meeting with the neighbor, his selected engineer, our landscape architecture team, and our clients in order to have an open and collegial discussion about the proposed wall, the screening, et cetera. And at that meeting, it was an open and free-flowing discussion. And so all ideas were brought forth. The engineer that Mr. Perrette uses, Tom Nelson from McCord, had a few ideas, and we incorporated the ideas that were verbally given to us during that meeting. It was indicated that following that meeting, we would receive a letter with a full list of those ideas. We haven't to date received that, but certainly we're open to evaluating any letter that we might yet receive.
I mean, I think that's a fair question. And as I said, we were hopeful we would have gotten that before then because it's been quite some time since that meeting has occurred. Obviously, if the Perrette's attorney indicates that we can get that in the next 24, 48 hours, we're certainly willing to leave this hearing open. I think would we be on the next hearing in May 28th?
Probably not. Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
The only May meeting is St. Luke's right now, right?
Next week's meeting, which is our regular meeting, is solely devoted to St. Luke's right now.
right, so
Almost.
that's, I mean, we were, if it was going to be kind of a short period of time, we would certainly be willing to leave this open. Notwithstanding that, I would look to the commission honestly as to whether or not they thought that was something that they would need to see and do before closing the hearing. I mean, I'm obviously not going to do anything that would jeopardize the application if you felt like that should happen. But we would really like to have confirmation from them that they will deliver this letter and that we will in fact, be able to have that in a timely fashion so that we can bring it to your attention. As I said, McCord Engineering is a fine firm. We have no issue with anything that they would come up with. We think that it would be helpful. We've already taken a number of their verbal requests, and those have been put into this particular application already. But to your question, I know I'm sort of skirting around a little bit. We just want the information as soon as possible We've, this has been a long process so far already for us because we, if you recall, this meeting was misnoticed the first time. So we were hoping by this time we would actually have, we always kind of put 2 hearings as what we may get our final decision on. So if it's going to be pushed out to June, we just as soon get this information and something from the applicant and something from the neighbor saying that they will absolutely have this letter, or that maybe they're okay and don't need the letter.
Attorney Rucci, I'm a little confused on the two components of the timeline. If this was supposed to have been heard 2 weeks ago, and I know that it was changed for reasons unassociated with your applicant, but wouldn't we have had this discussion about the absence of the McCord letter 2 weeks ago, and why
Yes.
don't we have it now?
So 2
Or
weeks.
what has been done to specifically get that letter from?
So when we met with the client and when we met with the neighbors, they were very concerned about how quickly the application was coming about. We had made representations to them that we would keep the hearing open regardless, that we wanted to open the application, we wanted to hear the commission comments, but that we would keep the application open so that they had time to review it, they had time to get us the McCord letter, and that we could then move forward. So we had already made that representation to them that we would keep the hearing open.
But that still doesn't get to my question. What has either the neighbor or McCord said to you about delivering this letter?
We've requested it through our engineers at least twice, and we just haven't received anything.
Thank you.
And I think we'll hear from them tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Engel?
So maybe I'm just not finding it in the packet, but I see a lot of overhead views, but I really want to know what I'm going to see from Russell's point of view and what I'm going to see from Perret's point of view. I start from the place of this town has in the regulations, and correct me if I'm wrong, this 4-foot step back, 8-foot, go up 4 foot. And that works. That works for a number of reasons. It works visually. It works safety. People don't fall off 9-foot walls, around town. So it's a safe thing. It's visually pleasing. So I'm having a tough time with, we looked at that and this is better. I want to know. So I need more specifics about what that might have looked like and why this is better. 2, I'd like to see what it looks like as an elevation, because when you talk about 2 foot, 4 foot, 9 foot, and then coming back down to 2 foot, that makes me think, oh, he's not really building a 9-foot wall. He's building a wall that's partially 9 foot and maybe only for a foot. But I can't find that anywhere in this presentation. So I want to see it.
So
And then the third thing was you talked about a concrete, and this isn't that. And then you used a bunch of fancy terms of what this is, but I don't know I don't know what they mean, what that means. That block construction, what that really means. And I imagine I'm not the only one. That's it for now.
I'd like to, if I may comment on the block wall construction, would that be appropriate? The modular block wall, one good characteristic about it is it doesn't require a deep foundation. It's very shallow, and the way it stabilizes as you come up, you have fabric that goes back and you fill on top of it, and that resists the overturning. So as you build it up too, you create a barrier, and it goes up daily. So as far as ease of construction and the least amount of disturbance, this is a very good wall selection, not to talk to the fact that it's 8 to 9, 10 feet high, but it's just the fact that the way this is built is essentially just from the ground up. And as you continue up, you have a wall that continues to block any sort of runoff. It's not nearly as disruptive as a big concrete wall, which takes, think about it. You dig it first, you pour your footing, you come back, you have to put your forms up, you have to put your steel, all these things. It's a much longer duration of exposure. So that's why we like it in this application.
And just, Commissioner Engel, on page 34, you'll see, oops, Carlos just lost it for you. So to give you an idea of sort of where the wall kind of moves up and down. So the first 17 feet of this wall are 4 feet or less. This is this pink area you'll see marked in here. And
Moving from left to right.
left to right, yeah.
For
And-
17 feet.
Yes, and it's marked also on your diagrams, a little hard to see, I'm sure. And then you have about 208 feet that are anywhere from 5 to 9.8 feet. And that's sort of that main red part of the wall. And then it tapers down again to about another 40 feet under 4 feet of wall, just to let you know. So you can see these are all marked in this area. I know that doesn't answer all your questions, but just to give you an idea as to the length of the wall and where it sort of moves up and down. The entire wall itself is about 265 feet long.
Is there a railing on the top?
Yes, yeah, you'll see actually in the elevation, there is a graphic that shows both of the items that you requested. So it shows an elevation section through the wall, so you can see exactly how it would be put together. I know I'm looking for it. And this one. So if you go to slide 35. And so, yes, there would be a very transparent mesh railing at the top, a guardrail, in order to prevent falling off of that wall. Secondly, there is a plan showing, as Dave, Attorney Rucci just indicated, showing the lengths of wall that are different heights. I wanted to address the question about the 4-foot wall plus an 8-foot horizontal separation plus a 4-foot wall. So one of the challenges of this property that's not immediately obvious, and it wasn't to us because we actually started with the 4-foot wall, separation 4-foot wall. One of the reasons why that became particularly difficult is that the property has a cut out of it. It isn't a wholly square shape. There's a big sliver out of the side of it. And the reason that exists is that when this was subdivided, this was many acres. It was subdivided into 2 properties in order to make the property that is now Mr. Perret's property a buildable lot. A minimum diameter 350-foot circle had to be placed on that lot. And so in order to make that, you can overlay a 350-foot diameter circle, and it's the exact shape of the property line. That's literally how the surveyor did it. So that big cut out of the property means that on the northern property line, we have a much tighter space to work with. And if our goal is to maximize usable land, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish in that particular area, it becomes really tough when you rob another 8 feet. And it sounds a little silly, like 8 feet, really? It's 5.5 acres. Consider the position of the house, which we already moved 12 feet closer to Onoak Ridge than the old house to try to get away from that angled property line as much as we could, and consider that 3 acres of the property won't be touched. The entire southern side, the entire southeastern side, and the northeastern side are remaining exactly as is. So when you put all that together, it isn't as big a property as it might seem in the area that we're trying to address.
But to go back to that sheer length, I mean, this is the length of a football field, the entire.
It is, right,
wall.
because of the way the property is oriented. So the property is more like a hallway. Rather than being deep into the rear yard, which many properties are, this property has the rear yard in the narrow dimension of the property. And so we're running the wall along what would be considered the long side of the property in order to maximize space in the rear yard. You know, there probably are millions of iterations of design compositions that we might be able to come up with. And we certainly went through a lot. Our client was very patient as we worked through and explored and discovered. And what we're bringing to you today, we feel, in our professional opinion, is the most optimal for the objectives that we're trying to achieve.
Okay, I'm gonna let Mr. Swerdlow go and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Mr. Swerdlow.
Commissioner Swerdlow, I've been studying page 35 L-2.0. And unfortunately, I don't have a magnifying glass here. So I can't see it very clearly, but these horizontal lines are 2 feet apart?
Yes.
Okay. And on top of the wall is slightly angled. On top of the wall, there's what appears to be a 4-foot fence in front of which there's vegetation.
Correct. 42-inch guardrail.
So if I just add this up, it's from the elevation at the bottom where the tree line is to the top of the rail is 14 feet.
Correct.
Okay. At its highest, because then it changes.
Correct. It changes as the land below it is changing, correct?
Okay. If you come back, if we have you back, I wonder if you can show us a detail, a really enlarged detail of just the end section of this, because it's extremely hard to see it here. But at first I didn't see what the actual protection, because I couldn't read the note. That's just me.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see that. And I also think the comment about seeing an elevation, because it does concern me that of this block wall, I don't see it in context of anything else in this town. You know, if it was a stone wall, if it had some character that added to rather than subtracted from a retaining wall, I think I would understand it more clearly.
We agree with you. If the wall were visible, we would agree 100%.
Okay, well, that's the question, is the wall visible or not? And even though you have, you know, trees here that are going to be green all year long, you're still going to see through them. And you're going to also see a shadow projected by the wall itself. So I think an elevation at its highest would be useful here, and one that shows the entire 14 feet from ground at, you know, at its highest level to the top of the wall, to the top of the fence, with what the vegetation is behind it.
Sure.
And the last comment I have is, will this vegetation at some point then come over and adorn the front of the wall? Will it drape down onto the wall, or is it just meant to hide the fencing from the property owners themselves?
Great question. Actually, lots of great comments. I think that an elevation of the wall showing the guardrail from below is certainly something we can produce. In fact, we contacted Mr. Perret again, asking if we might be able to come over and take photos from his side of the property, so that we could superimpose over that where the wall would be located, so you might be able to see that. The guardrail planting, so the vegetation at the top of the wall, would be intended to drape over the top 2 to 3 feet of the wall, to sort of take the curse off of the top of the wall, as it were. So even if there were some small opening in the evergreen screen, you would see a blousing of plant material overcoming the top of the wall. And I think that that's an important note, that the guardrail is not visible, much like a mesh pool fence surrounded in planting or surrounded in a hedge is completely invisible. It's our intention that the guardrail would similarly not be visible from either direction.
Okay. So if we do extend the hearing, if you come back with those details, it'd be
Of course.
very helpful. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Mr. Batten?
A few more questions. When I said, you mentioned the semicircle. Can you tell me what the height of the wall is, that section?
Right here. That's 40, that's less than, 40 feet of that is less than 4 feet, 4 feet or less. This pink section right here?
So the wall height, it's a dynamic number, right? Because it's changing as the topography below it changes. Since the contours below the wall are existing and will remain, you can figure the wall height by counting the contours as you go western. So if you come from the corner, the wall starts at a top of wall that's almost the exact same as the contour right below it. The wall begins to grow. It grows a foot tall, it grows 3 feet. Suddenly now the wall is an animal. No, the wall is growing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you get towards about 2/3 of the way to the western property line, the wall is now 6 feet tall. And then it continues. There's 2 more contours, 7, 8, and then right at the corner, 9, if that makes sense. So we could certainly do an elevation from the Perret property looking southerly so that you could see that elevation. And what it would show is it would show a diagonal, a slice of cheese, where you would see the wall and the grade close together, and then you would see the grade dropping and the wall emerging. And we could also provide an elevation from the western side looking eastward, and you similarly would see, heading from the south, a triangle where the wall is small, the grade begins to drop, the wall is now growing, and then the wall is tall above it. Those 2 elevations would not be difficult to provide, if that's helpful.
Just a question about that same section of wall. How far is that off of the property line there? In the, what we're calling the cutout?
The northeastern section is 12 feet from the property line. That's a very interesting section of land. There is on the Perrette property an easement in favor of the owners of 672 Onoke that was written up long before our clients took ownership of the property that allows them to mow and maintain the space that is that easement. So in effect, we're still 40 feet from the edge of the eased space, but we're 12 feet from the actual property line. What's great about this in our meetings with Mr. Perrette, he had a suggestion that we took and thought was fantastic. Our prior application we showed to him had a single row of Norway spruces only on the Kelly property. It was his suggestion that rather than do that, why don't we stagger them over the property line into the easement space that's the mow and maintain easement, such that we broaden out that evergreen spacing and have an even greater density of spacing. So that's what this now shows, is a staggering half on his property, half on the Kelly property, and that allows that to have even greater density.
Okay. Do you want to piggyback on that? Because I was going to go in a different direction. So this may be a question for the engineers or maybe for Mr. Rucci, but is this retaining wall system necessary for you to comply with the drainage policy of the town? Because you keep touting the drainage improvements that this will allow for, but I guess I'm asking, is this a necessary drainage requirement, or is this just something that would be nice to have and also happens to help the drainage?
You want me to answer that?
Sure, go ahead.
You'll notice that this latest revision, we haven't added any more subsurface drainage structures. And again, we didn't need to, because just by leveling this out, we're just getting a lesser runoff coefficient. We're getting more infiltration. So to answer your question directly, no, it's not being done for drainage purposes. Both this design and the original design have both been signed off by your town engineer. And again, we didn't add any other drainage management structures as a result of this grading.
And when you reference the original design, is that the one that was submitted for the building permit?
Yes, without these retaining walls.
Okay, so when this was submitted for a building permit, there weren't retaining walls in the plan, and it met the drainage policy.
Correct, that's right. I wanted to make an interesting note about the basement walkout. So you mentioned early at the beginning of this meeting that the code has changed around walls and how they're treated in terms of the permit process. When this home was designed and put before the town, it was an as-of-right permit process. There was no special permit. And it included exceptionally tall walls as the basement walkout system. We were engaged by our clients to come up with a slightly more inviting series of walls for the basement walkout. Those walls went before the town planner, who then flagged for us that the code had changed at the exact time that we were coming back in with a revised basement walkout system. Prior to November, what you're seeing for the basement walkout would not have brought us here today to the special permit application process. But planner Carey suggested that even though there was an approval for walls of the exact same height already on the books, these should be brought before the commission to make sure that we were in compliance with the new process of permit application review for over 4-foot tall wall.
Commissioners, other questions? Are we ready to open it up and hear from the public?
It's Commissioner Turner. Can somebody speak to the site construction logistics? You're going to bring in a lot of fill, and it's going to require a lot of trucks, a lot of sound, etc. Have you thought about the circulation, and can you describe it in a little more detail?
I can speak just a little bit again about the wall selection again. It's a much longer duration, in our opinion, because of the heavy equipment you need to go down there and dig down below the frost line, a very wide footing, stockpiling of materials for a longer period of time, and then pour your, set your rebar, set your form, pour your concrete. That's if you do a poured concrete. If you do a large gravity stone wall of natural stone, you now have to import truck after truck after truck of wall stone, of which then you typically have to break quite a bit of it up and then you have to assemble this wall altogether. Again, a very long duration period of time. So as far as the logistics goes, again, this kind of a wall with this kind of material we have, which is really perfect for backfilling over the tie-back fabric, is a great selection. The other options would take a much longer period of time and far more disruptive. That's what I'll limit my discussion to, and see if Alan wants to take it from there.
It is true that in the course of building a home, there is import and export of material. And in the course of providing a flat recreation area, there will be import of material. It has been considered, we know what the quantity is and the trucks required to do that. And we think that it can be done in a safe and manageable way for the neighborhood. This isn't the first home to be built to have fill imported to change some portion of the grade. I'm sure we could find dozens of applications approved. So I think that that is something that we're aware of and we are mindful of, and the construction team is committed to making that as seamless a process as possible. The point that Len makes is really salient because it's very easy to quickly say, why not do a reinforced concrete wall with a stone veneer on it? Won't that look better? Of course it would look better. It also will take 3 months longer and cost 10x. So I think we have to weigh that in our consideration of the wall type. And when we're talking about 80% obscurity of the existing wall, I've seen it, I've witnessed it from Paret's side of the line. And the proposal of over 50 trees and shrubs, to correct your number, Dave, from earlier, I think that it makes a significant amount of sense to consider a wall type that's more efficient, has a lighter presence on the earth, and is done quickly.
Sir, I'm not I'm not questioning your wall type. My question was, how many yards of fill, how many truckloads are we going to have, and what is the duration? You gloss right over it. Like, you know, it's not a big deal. It's done all the time. Yes, it is, but it has an impact to the neighborhood.
Absolutely, and I didn't mean to dismiss that. Apologies.
Like to quantify what exactly you're going to do.
Len, can you comment?
Yes, we quantify this at about 7,800 cubic yards of fill that would be imported. It wouldn't come all at once, to your point. It would be over a duration of time. You would get it, you would do some stockpiling. And then the way this wall method works, as you bring it up, you spread the material. So each day as you lay a row of block, you're finished to that level. And you have to do that because this wall system relies on the tie-back fabric and proper compaction of the proper material on each layer. So yeah, there will be a period of time as you're bringing the material in. They like to source it. And then as you go, you're doing this literally day by day of completion. So disturbance-wise, whether we do poured concrete, gravity walls, block wall, yes, we would need to import that type of material, that much cubic yards.
Well, may I suggest that when you come back and to us the next time, that you develop some kind of logistics plan that shows the routing of the trucks, the staging areas, and give us a better idea of you know, how many trucks are going to be required to move 7,800 cubic yards of earth.
Certainly, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to speak again, Mr. Engel? I feel like you do.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you know where I'm coming from. The mayor of Mexico City wall, built in the 80s, that's a 9-foot wall. It meanders. That's an example of a beautiful 9-foot wall. The View put a 9-foot plus retaining wall, and the New York Times took a picture of it and talked about the controversial wall in New Canaan on the front page of the New York Times. So there's a big range, and that's why it's really important that we look, that we know more about how this thing is going to look, how it's constructed, and so that's what
Fair
I mean.
point.
And when you say modular block, I think the View, and I think the neighbors are thinking the View, and I need to be reassured that this isn't going to look like the View.
Well, and also, and to your point, yeah, I mean, it's going to be hidden. I mean, what we're doing is going to be hidden. It's not going to be like the Oak house, you know, which I pass every day and watch that wall fall down every day too. Because that thing fell down all the
I
time.
was going to bring that up
Yeah.
on how is this going to get maintained over time? Because I know a lot of these walls that do over time, earth moves, water moves, it comes through it, it pops seams.
Mhm.
I still don't know whether this is blocked with concrete between the blocks or it's relying on the earth and allowing the water to pass through it.
Just
Great points. The wall.
You're actually correct. It is a fairly porous wall.
Right. And intentionally so. The
Yes.
longevity and the durability of the wall is derived from the fact that the wall isn't fixed in place waiting to be cracked open by hydrostatic pressure. It's allowing for an amount of weep through that maintains the stability of the wall. And the geogrid tiebacks into the slope are a very different system in terms of their integration with the slope. So, you know, we're not here to say, hey, here's an unattractive wall and we're trying to pitch it. We're coming at this from a science-backed way saying there are reasons why early in our process we assumed a concrete retaining wall with rebar and clad with veneer and then went, is this right? Is this actually the best solution? Should we look at something else?
we can bring also, you know, I'm looking at this picture here. This sort of shows the wall. What I'll do next time is enlarge this so that you can take a good look at how this is being made and how the water does seep through it. Because once again, it's just not.
And the
It's just
picture
not-
on the left there is the material itself.
Yes,
Correct, yeah.
so I can enlarge both those.
It's a split face modular concrete unit, segmented unit wall is the official term for it. So the units are all the same size, they get stacked, and they are reinforced with a geogrid going back into
It's real,
the slope.
it's going to look like that picture we see on our, that gray
100%,
picture.
yes.
Which sheet number is that?
28.
Okay, commissioners, in an effort to move it along, let's open it up to the public, and then if we still have questions, we'll come back to Mr. Rochi. Do we have anyone from the public in the room who would like to speak? Ms. Zavatakis? Sarah, do you want them, I said there at the beginning, but do you want them actually at this table? Okay, I didn't know what that weight thing is, that looks like a light.
I think I can avoid the white thing if you guys can hear me. Hi, Amy Zavatakis, Rucci Law Group. I represent Diane and William Perrette. Hopefully you received the letter that I sent this morning. I had a few things I was going to say, but before I jump into that, I want to first address the representations that have been made about the communications that have been had with the Perrettes already and what they have and haven't provided. The Perrettes have been, appreciate that the neighbors reached out to them early on in the process. And yes, they have been in communication with them. Unfortunately, the most recent revisions to the plan, we didn't receive until yesterday. So to the extent that that the applicant's discussing the current plans, you know, we haven't really had a time to evaluate those. So the Perrettes will be evaluating that. There's going to be continued conversations, and their engineer will take a look at the plans, and if there are further comments, those will be delivered to the applicant. But there wasn't any intention to not provide them with any feedback. It has been an ongoing conversation, and as was raised by the landscape architect, he mentioned that he had asked to come onto the Perrette's property to view it from their side, to take some photos. Some dates were given. That hasn't happened yet, but there certainly hasn't been any intention. So I just wanted to clear the record on that. But as far as the wall goes, you know, this is as was pointed out, a 10-foot wall with a fence on top of it, making it basically a 14-foot wall along a vast majority of the shared property line between these two lots. It is not an attractive wall. The applicant's not even trying to claim that it's an attractive wall. A lot of the existing screening is on the Perrette's property. We can't rely on that screening as providing the screening for the applicant. And to the extent that there is existing mature trees there, you know, we all know what happens with evergreen trees. As they grow, they lose the limbs on the bottom. So while, we may be able to show this sort of dense look of trees when we look at pictures or, these drawings, the wall, the bottom of the wall is definitely visible and will be, I'm sorry, not, it isn't now, but will be visible from the Perez property based on what we've seen so far. And there is this very large structure within the setback right adjacent to their property. So we're definitely not at this point comfortable. We do appreciate the conversation that has been going on. And so I definitely don't want to come out too strongly against it because I think the conversation is going to continue, but we're certainly not at a point now where the Peretz can say that they are in agreement with the plans. Similarly, their engineer hasn't had a chance to look at the more revised plans, so we can't say that we're in agreement with the drainage. I think one point that Mr. Perret had raised while we were listening to the application, you were talking about this curtain drain. The curtain drain was working until the construction started. This has been a construction site for a long time, so drainage has been bad. We recognize during construction there's disruptions, but it's really is a very sensitive area and a lot of care needs to be taken to make sure that there isn't this increased runoff, as was shown. And I think that plan that shows the elevation of the wall, you can see not only does the property line currently slope down towards the Peretz property, but it continues to slope down. So we have to realize that the Peretz property is much lower. And again, this goes back to the wall. The wall from his property, for even forgetting that fence on top, is really almost 14 feet because the grade change continues to go down. Let's see. I think that was most of what I wanted to say. I think that there was some discussion that well, we could put a house up here. This is, again, we are within the setbacks, and we need to just make sure that we're being very careful as to not impact negatively the value and the aesthetics on the Peretz property, just to provide this applicant with a nice flat yard, because that's really, at the end of the day, that is the whole purpose of this wall, is to provide them with a flat yard. They've got a building permit. They're constructing a house that complies with all of the New Canaan's regulations, just doesn't have a yard that they want. So let's be careful about how we balance out these two desires. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll take Mr. Perret and then I'll go to you.
I'm Bill Perret, representing Diane and Bill Perret. And I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but to be quite truthful with you, I felt like I had to because I realized people are in a process of selling, but I think this should be in a process of information sharing. So I started this whole process with the Kellys, and they reached out to me, and Alan did visit the property. And I was actually hoping we would have an agreement, because early on, Sarah had said to me, when I called her, it'd be really good if neighbors talk. And so we talked, and I was hoping to have an agreement. But we don't have an agreement, and I think we're pretty far from an agreement. The wall that we talked about, it's an industrial wall. I mean, it's even worse than the wall that's on Park Avenue. Okay, but maybe at the end of the day, it's okay. But I was told that by Alan that one of the purposes of that, well, actually by the engineers, that the water goes behind the wall to run out into the drainage system. Well, now I'm hearing that the water goes through the wall. So which one is it, and how does that impact the water flow? The plantings are still something that's up in the air. Who's going to maintain those plantings in perpetuity? I think as Amy said a little while ago, the trees are great trees, but the first 4 or 5 feet of those trees don't have any needles on them anymore. That's typically what happens to pine trees. So that's something that's got to be dealt with, and who's going to deal with that in perpetuity? The fence, we don't really have an agreement on the fence yet. I understand it's going to be a fence that's not going to be, it's not going to be a wooden fence. That's at least what I'm told, but I think we need to have some agreement. And what happens if that fence comes down? What happens when the new fence is restored? And this drawing is actually a pretty good drawing because someone asked me the reason this is important to me is not to be an obstructionist, but if you take a look at the lower corner of that property, which is sort of nearest my house, the elevation is probably about 17 feet. So it's a little bit, if it's not done the right way and it's not maintained the right way, as I was explaining to somebody yesterday, it's a little bit like being on 42nd Street and looking up at the flight deck of the Intrepid with the airplanes on top of it. And, it's not in keeping with New Canaan. So we just, if we're going to have something, we need to have something that's agreed to, that's written down, and that it really is there after the Kellys and after myself. The question about McCord, this is the first time I'm hearing. Yes, we said we would write a letter to them laying out all our points, but this is the first time I've heard that this is really important to moving this application forward. I hired McCord really with the Russells, in cooperation with the Russells, because they did work for us and the Zex that owned that property 25 years ago. And no, as was stated, it didn't fail because it wasn't maintained. It failed because the builder allowed it to fill with silt over the last 2 years of construction. And that's why the system failed. So the system that was there was perfect. It worked very well. I'm sure the new system will work well. But I had not heard before that the McCord letter was really instrumental to moving the application forward. If it is, I'll speak to Tom. We'll try to get something done. But quite truthful, I'd like to get our agreement first before I necessarily give you the McCord agreement, right? I mean, and the reason I hired the McCord was because of all the runoff that was happening over the property over the last 2 years, not only coming onto my property, I had a property cleaned 3 times, coming onto the Russell property and infecting the entire pond system that's on the road. So, I'm hopeful that the next meeting we can make more progress, but I think this is a big issue for for me, because of course these things set precedent, and this wall is a pretty large wall, and the quality of it is not in keeping with the township of New Canaan. It might, from an industrial standpoint, it might really work. It might work on this property. A lot more has to be done. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Russell,
Can I ask a question?
who are you asking a question to?
This speaker?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Pratt, I guess we have a commissioner that wants to ask you something.
Today, so I didn't realize I was speaking.
Here we go. I wasn't quite sure what you were saying, but your consultant, obviously the applicant is anxious to get a letter from your consultant. And my question is, how much time would you need to have that letter delivered to the applicant?
Well, just to be clear with the letter, okay, because of all the drainage problems we've had over the last 2 years, not over the last 25 years, it's been fine for the last 25 years, but over the last 2 years during construction, including water coming onto my property and the pond being flooded. I hired a consultant to take a look at the plan that was on the website and to make sure that what they were building wasn't going to exacerbate the problem that exists today, and at least put us back to the status quo over the last 25 years. So we got input from that. When I spoke to Chris and when I spoke to Alan, they suggested we bring McCord, or maybe I suggested we bring McCord. We provided input to their engineer, and they said, "Will you give us that in writing?" And Tom Nelson said he'd be happy to do that. But I didn't realize that this was something the town wanted, that this was something that was going into the application. And I'm not even sure that that's the right process to follow, but I'd speak to my attorney about it and ask. I mean, I don't want someone later on to say to me, "You provided us with a engineer's report that says this is okay."
So,
Now, I need to understand that. That's all I'm saying, because I didn't hire him to do that.
so I just want to clarify that, again, as was discussed earlier, the house structure is permitted to be built as is with the system that's been designed by DeAndrea, and it meets the town of New Canaan drainage policy. The addition of the wall does not impact the drainage system that has been approved by the town engineer. So I understand why the applicant is interested in, McCord's report from Mr. Perret, but it's not necessarily, in my opinion, necessary for you all to make your decision, because it meets the town's drainage policy, and the letter from McCord, in theory, does not impact that because it already.
Yeah, but I'm going to raise this. The applicant raised McCord and Mr. Perret's concerns. As I sit here, I haven't got a clue of what Mr. Perret's real concerns are. And as a commissioner here, right, it wasn't, you know, we had an application which was done in the first place, right? The fact is, the reason for the change in all of the wall requirements was because of the thing that Mr. Engel made. We need to understand. Ms. Sabatakis says, I can't even get what you were representing because what you said is, I don't want to make a lot of comments here. So for us, we need to understand. And the first I've heard that's clear is what you just said, Mr. Pratt, which is we're a long way away and I don't have agreement. If you have technical support for that, that's one thing. If you agree, that's another thing. But the extant application, which is valid, is not for a wall, correct, Sarah? The application requires approval because of the wall. And either the Parrots and Ms. Sabatakis representing you, and I presume in a moment the Russells, are going to clearly say, I like this or I don't like this, or I have technical reasons I don't like this, or we won't get a letter from McCord. The McCord letter was raised by the applicant as being something they're waiting for. In addition to that, we're told that they want to hurry to get this approved, but then we find out through Mr. Parrott's comment that the last version of this plan was only delivered yesterday. That's incorrect?
It's inaccurate.
Okay, so
Sorry,
again,
I'm sorry.
I only offer that as somebody trying to act on this, there's a ton of misleading or unclear information, not misleading.
Yeah, look,
unclear information.
I'm not trying to be unclear or anything. Today was the first time I heard, we were not going to issue McCord was not going to give me a report. I asked him to look at the plans. He had a couple of observations. They said, would you share them with the engineer for the Kellys? We said, we'd be more than happy to do that. I wasn't going to pay for a report. I just asked somebody to look at it. That's number one. Number two, the Kellys and myself and Alan and Nelson from McCord and one or two others met on the phone. There were 6 or 7 things that we laid out. The 6 or 7 things were the plantings, were the wall, were in perpetuity, who's going to maintain it, was the fence that's going to be on top of it. The other thing is right behind that, what happened if someone wanted to build a pool house on that wall, is that okay? Okay, and those were the questions we had in order to have agreement. I was hoping we would have a draft agreement on those points even before today's meeting. We don't have them, so they're just questions in my mind. The wall, you can look at it yourself and you can have your own opinion. And I can pull up on my computer and show you, if you stand on my driveway and you look up where that wall is, right now there's an orange fence. You can see the orange fence as clear as day. So something, if that wall's going to be there, something needs to be done about that. That would be my opinion.
But,
Simple as that.
and the purpose of your testimony is to be that clear. If there isn't going to be a report from McCord, I don't care. But we can't have it as an open item. I mean, you know,
I'm not going to pay for a report from McCord, and I'm not going to put a report that I pay for into their drainage plan. They wouldn't do it the other way, which supports their drainage plan if there's a problem 3 years from now. I don't understand why I would do that.
So I think we've heard from Sarah that we don't actually need anything from McCord because the drainage
Yeah.
has already been approved. So let's just table that. If you have additional concerns that you want to put in writing so that it's clear to us and to the applicant, you know, it's the height of the wall, it's the landscaping, it's the maintenance, you know, that would be great.
Yeah, I was actually coming to hopefully support it, but when I heard some of the things, I think I had to raise the questions, so.
Okay. All right, next speaker.
My name's George Russell. I'm here with my wife, Julie. We've lived in 467 Country Club Road for 30 years. Like Bill, like the Kellys, we built our houses. I'm urging this group to continue this application. We have significant drainage problems on Country Club Road. There's been a significant misrepresentation of the facts. that there's been a history of drainage problems. 25 years ago, 3 neighbors got together, put together about $100,000 of our combined funds, had a plan drawn up to deal with a water condition that occurs when you've got a house on a ridge, Owen Ridge, and the water cascades down a hill over 3 properties. It was a very neighborly agreement. We hired an engineer. There were no lawyers involved. As a matter of fact, to this day, there's a pipe that runs underneath my property that goes into a field that allows Bill's water to run onto my property on a handshake. I'm hearing representations that the drainage condition is somehow or another a history. Well, for the last 25 years, there hasn't been a drainage problem, Bill. 0. Since the first shovel went in the ground, and anyone who lives in New Canaan knows there's 2 things you find in the ground in New Canaan. If you can get the shovel in there because of the rocks, about 18 inches to 24 inches, you're going to find water. Has anyone questioned the depth of the cellar hole here? Well, I walked up there last winter and there was 12 feet of water in it. Where's all that water going to go? So this plan, I feel I've been carrying this thing around New Canaan now for months. So this is the plan that was pulled together by McCord. I don't expect you to see this, but this has been on file now since April. This plan has all 3 of our properties on it. This is the combined drainage plan that has worked flawlessly for 25 years. For the last 2 years since construction has started, Bill has had upwards of 18 inches of mud on his driveway. I've had water. I now have water coming up from the ground on our property. Last winter, the first time in 30 years, we had to put salt on our driveway because we had water coming up hydrostatically delivered because the excavator thought it would be a good idea to pour all of the water into a curtain drain that was in the property, which, well, what happens? By the way, we don't have status. We're not in a butter. We're 141 feet away from this property at about a 30% grade. There's an app for that. You don't need an engineer to tell you what the grade is. A 30% grade, water coming down, the level of impermeable surface just created by the roof lines. This cellar, how can we not have a drainage problem when the Peretts, the Russells, and by the way, there are 4 or 5 other neighbors on the street willing to come to a meeting here. I didn't want to get into petitions and things like that. But the other neighbors around the street, around the pond, are equally concerned about this. So I really think that how can we be dealing with a stone wall situation when in fact we do have a drainage problem today? We've had it for, what, 2 years? But most significantly, and then of course there was the 4-inch storm that's the reason why we had a drainage problem. All of these excuses were made. Well, the facts are when the first shovels went in the ground, we immediately had drainage problems. I went up and I spoke to the guy driving the excavator truck because I didn't know who was doing what, and he had never seen this plan. They didn't know anything about this plan. I brought this to Maria in April. And then this magically started appearing in some of the documents that were put into their application. Maria did not know about this, she told me, and it's been on file here. So I think we have a process that has to be revisited in terms of the drainage problem that we have. Yes, in fact, for the first time since living on Country Club Road, we did hire an attorney because I was finding out about letters written by Mr. DeAndrea, who I'm sure is a very competent engineer, as is Mr. McCord, but he was dismissing this plan as not as good as his plan, and that this plan, wasn't adequately constructed. Well, this plan worked, and since Mr. DeAndrea and the construction has been underway on Country Club Road, every rainstorm we have problems. Every rainstorms. And I'll close with one point. This is not about aesthetics and just having puddles to deal with. Right now, the water that flows down my 146 feet or off of Bill's property that's placed on there and directed to currently goes right over his property, comes right onto my property and across my septic reserve field. So if my septic system goes, I don't have a place for a second septic. So, you know, it's not aesthetic. So I'm certain the Kellys, and I have a lot of sympathy for you folks. But I mean, the engineers and the town could serve this neighborhood, I think, better. And I'm delighted to hear some of the comments and questions here this evening. So I think we're in good hands.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else this evening that would like to speak on this application? Is there anybody on Zoom raising their hand? No. Okay, well, we haven't decided anything yet. So commissioners, do we have any last questions for the attorneys, or can we decide how we're going to handle this going forward? Okay. So we've had a lot of conversations about things to ask the applicant to bring back to a next meeting. We haven't said which next meeting. I guess that begs the question, if anyone here does not think this wall is appropriate, period, end of story, why make the applicant or the neighbors continue to go through this process? So I'm assuming if we're asking them to come back, everyone here is open in some capacity to an arrangement that involves a wall of this magnitude.
I think a 10-foot wall is too much. I think it puts the neighboring property in a hole. I think there's other answers to it. So, I mean, I would love to see a different design than what's been proposed.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think both sides appear to indicate that they are interested in trying to resolve this through discussions. And I certainly would be open to approving this based on agreements between the neighbors and the applicant. Yeah, we're not necessarily requiring that, but I'm hoping that there can be, that by continuing this, that we would facilitate that.
I would be open to a solution that involved the neighbors agreeing. I do think there is a separate corollary issue, which is the sheer size of this is probably the largest wall in New Canaan. And I think that question is separate from approval for this one, but I mean, this is, I think, another question that comes to my mind is the drainage problem that exists now. Is it made better or worse by the proposed implementation? And again, my question to both parties before about the engineering aspects of this is that engineers can probably provide a better assessment of that than not. And you know, you now have the house there. It's permitted. It's been approved. And therefore, your issue has to be, how do we resolve this to the benefit of everyone involved here? So my suggestion, notwithstanding the fact that, and I do understand your concern about not issuing a report that you might later on regret, but my instinct here is that getting the engineers talking together and the neighbors talking together is the pathway to potential approval.
I also agree with Mr. Benton. I think the wall is very large. I'm concerned about the precedent it would set. And I don't think, I'm not convinced that it's our job to give everyone a flat backyard. I think that's a nice thing, but that's also not the piece of property that was purchased here. So, but if the rest of the commission is open to continuing this conversation and seeing if the neighbors and the applicant can come back with some additional information to make their case, then I think we continue it. I guess the question then becomes to Sarah, when do we continue it to?
So first and foremost, does the applicant think that they could come to an agreement by May 28th when our next meeting is?
That's Tuesday. No. All right, I'm seeing some head shake in the background.
Doesn't look like that date would work, no. So we would be inclined to keep it open till the June date.
And what is the June?
Okay.
I know we have a lot left.
We'll just say the June regular meeting so we don't mess
Okay.
up the date.
All right. All right. So we will continue this to the June regular meeting. Mr. Rucci, are you clear on, I saw you guys taking notes. I'm sure you've got the list of things that
Yep.
you've asked for.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so that item is continued. Next on the agenda is 72 Park Street. Upon application of Richard Hewitt, authorized agent for Sig Fiona owners for a special permit approval pursuant to sections 4.2.d.1 to allow the White Buffalo, also under new ownership, to expand their outdoor dining and approval for music outdoors twice a week from May 1st through October 31st in the Retail A Zone, 72 Park Street, map T, block 43, lot 829. Before we get started with the applicant, I'll just give the commission a quick overview. As I'm sure you all remember, we heard this application last in October. At that time, we denied without prejudice the request for outdoor music and reverted back to their 2019 special permit approval, which allowed for 2 outdoor events a year and 4 tables. And we told them to work on some things and come back to us, and here they are. Tonight, I'll reiterate this after we hear the application, but I think the things the commission needs to consider is this an appropriate location for us to allow outdoor dining to bleed into outdoor entertainment? If so, what type of outdoor entertainment events do we wish to allow, and are they amplified or non-amplified? How many and which type are allowed each season? And I guess we're looking at a season is probably like May through October. And then what controls are needed to regulate the events? Mr. Benton, you just run to the.
He must have, yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Benton seated, and Mr. Knowles, I'm going to seat you as well for Mr. Herring. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Richard Hewitt. I know last time we were here back in October. Since then, I've taken over ownership of the White Buffalo. The other gentlemen who used to be part of it that were here at the last meeting are no longer part of it. Chris Meyer is now.
I'm Chris Meyer. I'm owner of Against the Grain. I've been here in town for about 8 years now. And I bought into White Buffalo on January 1st. So I am a new face here. It's me and Rich that are the sole owners of White Buffalo now.
So I know that just to start off, in the past, I know that there's been some issues with communication, a lot of different things. And since we have taken over ownership in January, for the past few months, we've been working and trying to take a look at all the different points from the last meeting. We are trying to communicate the best that we can with everybody. We're trying to start a whole new way of it, change some things, open up more communication, because obviously we found out that there was not as much communication in the past with the previous owners. And we're trying to get things changed to sit there and alleviate and open up. We want to be able to adjust and work with everybody around us to make it happen, because some of these things with the music, the outdoor space, obviously as a bar restaurant, the outdoor space is very needed for many places. It's a big part of it, especially spring, summer, going into fall. So we are trying to change that and communicate and adjust, and are willing to adjust and open up the line of communication with everybody to make things work of what it is that we're asking for.
Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about what your application is for tonight and what you're asking
So we are asking for to do the music from May through October. We're asking for 2 nights a week. Whether, I know it's not all amplified. It's a mixture of amplified bands and acoustic bands, whether they're 2-piece, 3-piece, 4-piece. Some of the bands that are New Canaan raised bands that are part of it, some of them are 4 or 5 pieces. They're acoustic, they're a mixture. That's what we're asking for. We've tried to adjust and hit a lot of the points from the last meeting with, we did some decibel readings. We've done we've been working for the past couple months since the weather has changed with our old permit of, which was only the 4 tables, none of the, we've been trying to show, we started doing some of the things, which there were pictures, all the stuff that we have submitted with the ropes being put up. We have like bought signage, things to put out there stating, staying in like within the area and everything. And we're trying to control, change the way that it was set up so that we can proceed to hopefully be able to do more of the music.
Okay. I'm going to let the other commissioners ask questions, but on the acoustic report that you submitted, do you want to talk a little bit about who did that and what you determined?
Yeah, so that report was provided by, so just out, to be honest with you, we looked to find sound engineers to come in to the White Buffalo and measure the sound. Every quote we were getting was upwards in the $7,000 to $10,000 to come out and measure the decibel levels at all the different areas. That's a lot for a small business. That's a lot of money to put forward. We have a lot of connections in the music industry, so we reached out to some local bands that have great reputations all over, like in New Canaan, not playing just with us, but with Gates, Uncorked, all over Connecticut. And some of them had experience with measuring decibel levels. So they came out and we got approval of the town to have them come out. We let the town know up front that they were coming out. It was open knowledge. I let our neighbors know that they were coming out. And I said, if you'd like to walk around with us as we do it, you're more than welcome. We're going to go into your establishment and measure the acoustic level to make sure we're not affecting you in any way with our bands. So that was upfront with them. And I felt like that was something important because I went back, I know I'm a new owner. I went back and I watched the meeting in October and I saw everything that was being brought up and it was serious. And I know I looked at it, I knew there was things we had to do. And that was one of the things, was measure the decibel level or make sure we're not affecting our neighbors. So we reached out and the band came out. We walked around, we measured the different decibel levels of the different areas. We took into consideration the resident issues, which were up on the parking lot. We walked up there, measured the decibel level up there. We took into consideration our neighbors, how loud the band was compared to how loud it was outside on the street to our adjacent restaurant neighbors and our resident neighbors. We measured each decibel level, and by making a small few adjustments, which I wish that we had done in the past, by changing the direction of the speakers, by lowering the decibel level of the bands, it made an absolutely huge difference. Up to when the music was at its loudest, adjacent neighbors were having a decibel level of 85. When we adjusted, it was a decibel level of around 65. That's a huge difference, like sound-wise. So I think a small adjustment like that being made was important. And I think that was part of the miscommunication that was not being done before. So that was something important. And that's what that report you're seeing there. And that's us trying the music levels at different levels, high, low, mid, and measuring at the resident complaint, the adjacent restaurant complaints, and the street level complaint. And you can see the difference and how that was made. So that's something I was in charge of. So
At this point, unless you guys have more you want to share, I'll just let the commissioners start asking questions.
sure.
This is Commissioner Canag. So what I'm a little confused about what your actual proposal is. You had a band come out and they were playing and you measured the decibel levels at various points.
Right.
But how do we know that when they play it at the actual concert that they just don't, they could
Well, that's
crank
something, I
up
mean,
to
that's something,
another,
that's something we're
decibel
gonna be
level,
very
right?
strict about, obviously. We understand how serious it is, and we don't, and trust me, my father hates any kind of noise with his neighbors, and I've heard growing up, I know that's like a huge issue. So I understand the neighbors not wanting to be on their deck and hear loud music. That is something we're taking seriously, so all we can do is sample it the best we can and then prove it to you.
Well, are you, I guess my question is, are you proposing some specific decibel level as the maximum that could be generated by the
Yes.
band
Well-
at the location?
Yes.
where
We're
they're
trying to,
performing?
Yes.
when we had that band play, they played and they were playing at pretty much at like their loudest. And then we changed
So what is the
so-
decibel level that you're proposing?
The decibel level that they said for the band was stage area 75 to 85.
Okay, so it couldn't go over 85 under your
Correct.
proposal?
At what distance?
that's right, 75 to 85, right where the band is playing.
What the band is playing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And how would we know whether you were following that?
Well, that's where we're trying to, with the communication that there wasn't before, we want to be able to, if somebody is having an issue, if like the neighbor, so say like the closest neighbor is having an issue with the sound, if they can let us know or let you guys know, or whoever it is that they would need to, and then contact us. We want to make sure that we are completely open to the communication so that we can adjust it to make it work for everybody. If they think that it's a little too, if they think that that decibel level of say 85 is too loud at where they're at, we can adjust that and lower it and not go above 75
Or
or
would
60.
someone, on your side, measure to ensure that the 85 maximum?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense for us
Who's gonna
not
do
to.
that?
yeah.
Well, most of the
They-
bands
I
that have
understand.
been playing, they have a sound person who comes and sets them
Oh.
up. So that person, when we book the bands or whoever we talk to, we can tell them, like, part of our thing with the bands is letting them know that this is the highest, the maximum that they can go to, and they cannot go over that. If they go over it, we have to stop the music. They are not welcome back because they're not
I mean,
following
in our
our
application, we
directions.
say like we've assigned me as like the person to measure that, and if they have problems, call me. All
We
our
didn't-
neighbors are gonna have my direct contact information, so that's something I've taken on myself. I've been in town, I feel like people trust me. I don't know, some of you might have my
Previously-
furniture, I don't know.
Previously, we didn't have, there wasn't somebody there outside to monitor
Right.
it. Now, the fact that between the two of us, with Chris being involved now, he wants to take it upon himself to be the person monitoring it every time there's a band. To make sure that one of us is there to monitor the decibels and make sure that they are not going over that.
So I have
We
one
did not
other-
have that before.
Go ahead, please.
I have just one other question. And that is, you said that you were looking for permission to have music 2 nights a week, which would be a combination of acoustic and amplified
Mhm.
bands. But in your letter, you seem to ask for live bands 2 nights a week and then acoustics without any restriction. So are you now saying that there would only be 2 nights a week when you'd have
It's
music?
2 nights a week that we were just looking for.
Okay.
Whether it doesn't, it's a mix. We're not looking to have
Regardless of what it
But
is,
in a-
it's 2 nights a week.
2 nights a week.
Okay, this is Commissioner Chris, just to follow up on Commissioner Kenag's comment. So at the bottom of your ask, it says, number 2 is we also ask that due to the low decibel level of acoustic solos or small bands is not defined. That's another issue. We are permitted to allow them on an open basis. You're saying you don't want that anymore.
We're asking for 2 nights a week, whether it's a Thursday and a Saturday or a Friday, Saturday. But it's 2 nights a week that we're asking for.
Because the number 2 would, in open basis, I assume that means not a defined term, any night of the week.
I guess we meant that if there was like special occasions, because acoustic, I mean, I just don't, the difference between acoustic and live bands is
Significant.
significant. So if there's like a special occasion, like a
Sometimes like
holiday or something, but
like a Cinco de Mayo fell on a Sunday. The weather's nice. We would do it on one of those days. 90% of the time we're doing it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, are the days that make sense. It's not a Tuesday,
or if
Wednesday.
someone
night.
just played a guitar and wanted to play outside one day, like if it was a Tuesday, and it would be nice if you could play outside. If you can't, then you can't. But I don't think it would disrupt the town if that happened.
Okay, I'm going to let that slide for a minute. Going back to your prior comment about decibel level limits. So again, you may not know exactly what set is going to be played by the band and exactly how loud those are. And so I'm wondering, in effect, you'd have to be, standing at the rope with a decibel meter as they go through a few riffs to get a sense of, okay, what's the sound going to be? And it doesn't seem like what is going to happen. Also, the fact, even though you are saying, hey, I'll give people my cell number, they can call me, the idea of saying, well, the fix is just people call and complain. I think we want to avoid the complaints in the first place.
We're not trying to have someone complain. We want to be able to communicate with the neighbors and adjust it to make sure that they aren't going to make a complaint or, are getting upset about it. We want to make sure that we can, it's really going to be up to like us really being as stern as possible with the sound person for each band and making sure that they are keeping it under that. If it comes about that they raise it or whatever, like we're going to have to be the ones to, like, we can't have them play. If they don't want to follow the direction of keeping the decibel level under what we're allowed, then they just can't be part of it.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be concerned about the self-certification aspect of this. And so I'm not sure really how to deal with that, but it seems like some of this is self-certification. I would also note you say nights, but that's not defined in time. It would probably suggest that you need to stick a pin in an hour.
Well, I know that
Start and stop time, not
I know
just
that the
night.
noise ordinance, as far as I know, is 10 PM, which we've never gone past the time. And we've always started it, we have always done 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock. It's never been anything different. I mean, I know that there was like a daytime thing that happened, which we're not looking to do it at that time to alleviate none of the neighbors that are there during the day. Most of the neighbors are gone by 6 o'clock. So we don't want to do anything. We're looking at after 6 PM. It would mostly be 7 PM to 10 PM. We don't go past 10 PM at all, ever. We never did before. And we're just looking for those hours of 7 PM to 10 PM.
That's it. So the ask now is defined as evening is 7 to 10
It's
PM.
it's the 2 nights, 7 from evenings is the only time. We know that most of those neighbors are all there during the day. We don't want to cause any more issues with any of them. Most of them close at 6 PM and are gone. There's just the restaurant next door who is open at night, which that was the main one that we were trying to include in the read of the decibel levels and make sure that they were part of it.
Last question. You said select number of holidays. I would suggest that you may want to specify exactly which holidays as opposed to we'll just pick holidays. For example, in some other, let's call it special permits or conditions where they say this date, that date. So you'd have to pre-select what holidays you would want as part of your ask might be helpful. It would be helpful to me anyway, as opposed to just saying holidays. and
Understandable. I know that sometimes
Specified later.
sometimes the date falls on, well, a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, which is usually our main time, but sometimes it'll fall on like a Sunday, but normally we're always closed on a Monday. It would never be a Monday holiday. We don't open on those days, so. I can specify, I understand what you're saying.
I would just suggest you may want to ask.
Yep,
What the commission
got you.
decides to do with the ask is different, but specify.
I mean, I don't even think that those special holidays would even really affect the 2 nights a week. It's really just the twice a week.
Thank you. Those are my
that we're
questions.
asking
Thank
for.
you.
Mr. Swerdlow and then Ms. Brendel.
So, Commissioner Swerdlow, you took decibel readings at the stage at 85. And you took those at the same time you took decibel readings elsewhere?
At the same time that the decibel level reading was 85, at the stage, we took the decibel reading at that level at the street, at the end of the alley, and up in the municipal lot at the same
What were
time.
those readings?
What were the readings at the end of the alley?
Well, we had 65 in front of the restaurant. Between 50 and 60 at the restaurant.
The Chez
At the same time as the 75 to 85, the reading at the restaurant next door, the adjacent restaurant was 50 to 60.
And when it says parking lot, that was the residential
municipal
spot. I was
lot.
standing right in front of the residential spot at the end of the parking lot, which was barely, I could barely hear any music.
Did you have any representatives with you from the adjoining
I did, no,
businesses?
no.
We had asked.
Well,
we
I
had
told them that,
told them
I
and
invited them, yes.
asked anybody to.
Because we walked
that would
around the
like to come,
restaurant during
but
the procedure.
Nobody showed up.
Mr. Angle?
We've been talking about the specifics of this, but I'd like to kind of pull back and talk and sort of put an outline around this. We've been talking about decibels. I've been reading the letters. I've been reading your responses to the letters. And it seems to me we have two different problems. We have the problem of setting a standard that you and your neighbors agree on. And I'll just use Tom Franco as an example, since he seems to be the most comprehensive spokesman for your neighbors. He talks not only about decibels, but he talks about traffic. He talks about garbage on Monday mornings. He talks about crowds. He talks about many different things. And it occurs to me that some of these things are not his responsibility, like safety in that parking lot. So I got to figure out what is the standard. And then the second question in this is who's going to be responsible for enforcing the standard? Because that's also coming up. You know, are the police the people who come and say, turn down the music? Is it your neighbors who say, come turn down the music? Is it your neighbors who say there's additional garbage? You know, is it the responsibility of your neighbors? So this commission is going to, in the end, I think, have to identify a standard, and it may be acoustic, it may be electronic, it may be, you know, how many patrons and what days of the week. There's going to be a standard. But for me, in order to define that standard, I'm also going to need to know whose responsibility it is to enforce this. It occurs to me, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to what I also am hearing between the lines here, is that you very much want to make a change, and your neighbors would just as soon maintain status quo. In their letters, they say, we'll just go back to the 2019 standard. And if they don't engage with you, if they don't meet with you, they believe that we're going to just stay at 2019. I think it's going to be important that we impress upon the neighbors, as well as to you, that you guys get together and develop that standard together, and answer that question on enforcement together. I mean, last October, I said, you know, what happens if the noise goes higher? And you said, yeah, well, we just tell the band to turn it down. And it seemed to me like we needed a more robust solution for it. And tonight you've said, when asked what happens when the noise gets too loud, well, we just won't hire that band again. I'm gonna need to know that the enforcement answer is going to be a much more robust solution than, well, we just won't hire them again. And I also need to know that it's not going to be the responsibility of the neighbors, the Tufts, Franco, you know, and the neighbors. When I say neighbors, there are residential neighbors and there are business neighbors, and they have different needs and different problems that they've identified here. So I know I've gone on for a bit, but I really do need to understand not just decibels, but I need to understand that we've set up a framework of standards and what the enforcement is. And I think the only way to get to A and B is to require that that conversation take place, that Tom be there, that Chef Louis be there, and that
Well-
you be there. Because seems like you're asking for meetings.
Is there any
maybe?
recommendation getting a
So,
mediator?
well, the thing is that we've tried, we have
apparently,
called, we
yes,
have
yes.
said, and we have sent letters, we have
I
gone
see
next
that
door.
throughout the
And we
letters.
have done it, but they have not shown up. Like, that's like, so the thing is that we've also, the two of us are taking over this now. So it's also going to be a matter of really somebody just believing that we are trying to change it ourselves. We are going to be there to enforce it. We didn't have that before. Now, granted, I was part of it before, but I was not the one, it wasn't my job, like I had superiors. Everyone's had superiors. You do what they say. They were not there to help me do it before. I have him here now to help me. We're trying to change it. We're trying to make a difference in the way that this is done, to do it where we can have everybody be in the middle ground and it be happy for everybody, where we're not losing out.
So
they're
you
happy
want
on-
that conversation with the neighbors?
And we have tried to have the conversation. We have attempted to bring them in, to have them there, let them know when we are doing the decibel levels. So it's really just a matter of, obviously, we have to prove it, but I mean, there's no other way. Like, we just have to show that we're serious, like, that this is what we're going to do. It wasn't like that
Like you
before.
said,
We're trying
we
to
need them to
be
also
more.
be a
Can I
part of it,
suggest
too.
that you, when you have this meeting with the neighbors, that it be a more formal than, hey, come by, or you try and come by, or the next day? In one of the letters, Tom Franco says, let's put an outline together. Let's put an agenda together. I think the second thing is, I think he wants more than him at the meeting. He wants to invite more than one. So I am just suggesting a more formal process, maybe with somebody mediating this meeting
That's what I was
in order to
suggesting.
make it most productive. Because it doesn't seem like the communication between your neighbors and you is happening, or it is very productive.
Well, trying to have a conversation with him and him trying to tell us to submit all the stuff that we had to submit to you guys, to the town. We submitted, they have access to it. It almost seems like he wanted all of that stuff submitted to him and his board make the decision, but his board doesn't
It was
make the
also, the
decision.
meeting was
You
April
guys make the
30th, and he said he was meeting with his board May 15th, so it was, it wouldn't have, it didn't make
I
any
know that
sense.
there's a lot of like he said, she said type of things going on, and we're trying to sit there. There's obviously been a lot of like things in the past where with things happening, things not being taken care of, and the past couple months since we have taken over the ownership, we keep trying to change the whole thing of like everything that goes on there, and we've been bringing in a lot more people, a lot more like families, a lot more like things because of just the things that we're trying to change. And we are trying to communicate these things to them, but it's not like, it just ultimately, it seems like he was more mad that he wanted him to have the decision, but it wasn't, in the end, it's not really his decision. We are trying to communicate with him to get the decision where it comes from.
While you are right, it's not his decision. It's going to continue to be a problem for you. You're right, it's not his decision, but these letters that keep piling in continue to be a problem for you. So I'm gonna jump out on a limb and suggest something. I want a solution here. And typically this boards generally split the baby and just look for a compromise somewhere in the middle, give you less than you asked for, but less than the neighbors. No, I want what we used to call a pre-application hearing. I want a meeting in this building around one of these conference tables, and I want to invite Tom and them and you, and I actually would like a couple of the members like you and the head of zoning there. The head of zoning used to host pre-application hearings where people could hash it out, some of their ideas together. I think that would be hugely productive for you, because you're asking for something like 24 events, and the neighbors are asking for you to be at the 2019 levels. And there's a huge gap And I think we could probably get to this middle ground, but it shouldn't be us deciding between two massively different extremes. So I would encourage you to ask Sarah Carey for a date on the calendar and invite all of them to actually have a productive conversation. I don't see any way that we're gonna just say, yeah, go ahead, try 24 events without understanding who's responsible for enforcement.
So Mr. Engel, that ship has sailed a little. They're here.
I
now for a
understand.
Special permit. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have those conversations. I think that would be useful, but I don't think we.
I've seen this board, I've seen applicants pull their application until they've been able to meet with their
They're gonna
neighbors,
get
and
an
that'll be
answer.
up to you to decide, or you could take your chance and we're gonna, and then we vote.
Right. The other piece I was gonna kind of piggyback on top of that, and you've alluded to it many times, is that I think because of past events, the trust has been broken between you and some of your neighbors. And I understand that you're trying to turn over a new leaf and do things differently, and I respect that. But I think that sometimes that takes time to rebuild those relationships, and sometimes you have to walk before you run. And so coming in to Mr. Engel's point and asking for 24 events in a year when you've previously been allowed 2, I don't know if I'd consider that walking. I'd consider that running pretty quickly. And so
But they've like, at the same time though, they're not even willing to come and talk to us to even meet in the middle with it. So it's really.
That's where we think we can help you.
But I understand that, but it's still not, it's not their decision to make it, I don't know. I get what you're saying. I don't
It's not
disagree.
their
I don't
decision.
disagree with you.
So I'm just gonna jump in. We cannot require, in the zoning regulations, we cannot require an applicant to meet with their neighbors. We can't.
require neighbors to come here.
Yes, so, it's all at the applicant's will and the neighbor's will to do that. So I understand Commissioner Engel's point, and, if that could have happened previously, that would have been great, but, how this organically came to be, I don't think that was ever an option. So we are at where we're at, and I just want to clarify for those on Zoom and for you all in the room, we can't jump ship from the process we're in now and
Unless you
require-
decide to pull it and ask us for an informal hearing. That's going to have to come from you. Well, you have the right, because you're on the calendar, to get a decision from this board.
That's true. So take that under consideration. Other questions from the commission? Mr. Benton?
Just going back from before, obviously, if you have amplified music outside, you're going to have a crowd. I didn't get a sense for the barriers and the placement of them, and if it's soft or rigid, anything like that, because that was a big issue last time, was the crowd extending beyond what was the barriers and impacting people going in
Well,
and out of the
it's-
garage.
The fact that there is a restaurant right next door. What happened a lot of times was a lot of their patrons were leaving from their patio while they're waiting for dinner to come over and stand there, and they're standing in the alley listening to the music. And that's not, it's like, I don't think that we should be looking at them and being like, you need to go back to your restaurant. You can't stand here and listen. Like, we're not trying to tell people what to do. They were enjoying it. We weren't stopping them from walking with their drink, or, they're standing in between. They have their drink from over there. They're enjoying it, whatever because they liked it. And then they would come over and have a drink. So it's hard to tell sometimes with we have our ropes and our patrons, and anybody that we are serving is on our patio and it within our ropes. Those are the people that we're serving. Anybody on the outside of that, we wouldn't serve them. So people are just kind of hanging out all around. I don't know if there's, that's something that if we need to tell people they have to disperse, but I don't know.
We did add signage. that
I
says
don't
you
know
must
if that's
stay
like
within the
what-
designated area as well.
I don't know if that's the right thing to do by telling them, sorry, you can't stand here, you need to leave.
I don't think that was the issue last time. It wasn't people coming from Chef Louise listening to music. It was the crowd just being bigger than the space can handle.
So do you want to talk a little bit about you did submit a drawing.
I mean, we have put, we are roping off and we have put signs of staying within the
should be
designated area.
pictures of the
We've-
ropes
and
and the
yeah, we
signs
have,
as well.
we are putting that kind of stuff up to try and control it. I mean, I don't know, anyone who, our thing is we're telling people who are in our space buying drinks and stuff from us that they have to stay within our designated area. If they're beyond the ropes, that's not somebody that we're serving. That's not, and if they're standing out there, and that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's right for us to be like, you need to leave. I mean, I don't want to go and tell people, sorry, like, you know, you're not allowed to be here, or patrol them. Like, that's not, I mean, if we have to, I guess, then we have to, but then, you know, we're just pissing off more people in town, and they're like, why are you going to tell us we can't stand here? It's, you know, that's the only thing. But we're not serving anybody beyond the ropes, right? But that's out of our designated area.
So do you have issues containing people within the ropes, the people that are patrons?
No, people, because when we're serving them and taking care of them and they're drinking, we can tell them that they have to stay within our designated area, that they're not allowed to take their drink beyond the rope. They can't go out there.
Do you have like staff kind of being a bouncer?
Well,
in the
yeah, so
ropes?
like one thing that we're doing with the fact that we're now going to be out there, and we have like we're telling our staff that anyone who is, you cannot serve anybody beyond it. If any of the people that you're taking care of at the tables outside or serving drinks to, you have to tell them that they have to stay within it. We can be out there now to patrol it and make sure that nobody is walking beyond it, taking their stuff out there. But people who are just standing around, I don't know if that's something.
We've added signage too on the roads.
I don't know if
that
that's
clearly
something that
says that.
you guys would agree or disagree that we should tell those people they need to leave. I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't think that I should be telling somebody, sorry, you can't stand here.
So if I were trying to get to a solution that might work, I would highly recommend that you go back and fine tune this application with facts like, we'd like to try on a trial basis for 2 nights a week from Thursday through Sunday to have a maximum 85 decibel event. And if any of the abutters complain, they should dial whoever's on duty cell phone number and we'll shut it down, and send that around to all of the abutters. It is unusual for us to see an application where there's so many letters. Some were very pro your music, some were very anti. They sounded a lot like the anti-letters sounded a lot like the concerns that we did here last fall, which causes at least me as somebody to say, how could I vote in favor of this when I'm still not sure exactly what I'm voting for? Either it's acoustic or it's not acoustic. I mean, I understand the letter may have morphed. I think it would be really useful to lay out in black and white, send it to all of the neighbors, say, this is what we're proposing. It's different, it's less. To Ms. Nielsen's perspective, I think it would be a lot better to try to walk than to run, and to go to 24 events with no apparent monitoring that's active and live. I do know I've seen recently a decision in another community with anything that's higher than 70 decibels at 150 feet is an automatic shutdown. I have no idea if you can, not New Canaan, but you know what, you need more specificity to gain support, or at least to gain my vote of support.
This is Commissioner Chris. I got a couple of questions. First of all, the security cordon, has that been okayed by the fire marshal?
Has where the ropes and stuff are up?
Yes, sir.
So we have Paul Payne on Zoom if he wants to chime in.
My concern is that there's a fire or other hazard. People are leaving. They have to go through a narrow area. They hit the ropes. They fall over. It becomes a not good situation. So if Fire Marshal Payne is here, I would welcome his opinions on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. So in the past, when I have inspected that establishment for outdoor events that would require inspection on my part, the barriers were compliant. The exiting was wide enough, both at the alleyway and the stairwell going up to the Park Street lot. Whether a crowd stampedes and gets tangled in ropes, but they have clearly designated exits on both ends, which is what's required. The applicant had always left. I know a concern also was cars exit parking garage. And there has always been in the past, in my opinion, Certainly plenty of room to drive out of that parking garage, but I believe also if somebody had to back out of the parking garage, there was room to back out toward the Park Street lot to face Elm Street and be able to get out that way without the barriers interfering. So in the past, I really have not had an issue with the way the barriers are set up.
Okay. Thank you, Fire Marshal. Second, I've been through that area at times, and I can think of cold, rainy days when I'm walking by, not a soul is outside. I'm coming down the stairs from the Park Street lot, and I hear music coming out from inside, and there's not a live band. There's simply someone's playing a radio or something, and it was quite loud with the door closed in that area. So my question is, what other sound that's not live music? Many bars play music, or have sports on the television and so forth. It can be quite loud, and I worry about bleed from that too.
I just want to clarify, we don't regulate music and noise coming from within a business. That's just as the regulations are written, that's kind of always been our standard of, a restaurant can play music inside. And, it's up to the police and for the noise ordinance to be enforced from there.
I'm worrying about it, that maybe even doubling down, there's a TV going on inside that generates noise. You have this and it sort of expands, but okay. Finally, I get a sense that it's hard for me to get behind a blank check of a large number of days. And just doing 2, it may not be a decent test. I mean, as a suggestion, something along of maybe a 2-month permit. So you have, let's say, 2 nights a week for 2 months. You have an actual sort of live fire exercise to see what it actually is like. If it doesn't work out, it ends up 2 months, not too much harm is done. Some other decision is made. If it works out, you reevaluate it, then maybe tweak it. That'd be an idea.
Okay, I'll just suggest that we did try that last summer, and in October we revoked the permit that we'd issued last summer. So I understand it's a new day, it's
different
a
people,
different situation, but
new management could mean.
wouldn't be the first time if we went that route.
Same good idea.
Go ahead, Mr. Sperling.
We'll get new people.
When the former owners were here last, I had asked them to retain the services of an acoustic engineer to actually analyze the space and possibly propose some acoustic materials or remediation to make the space quieter. So you've come up with a report here that's, I believe, not done by an acoustic engineer, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So somebody kind of put this together with the U.S. Department of Transportation noise guide. And if you actually look at the noise guide, as the noise level goes from 70 to 80 decibels, for instance, it actually moves up exponentially by 3 times in terms of the sound pressure of noise. And in your own commentary at the end here, conclusions, recommendations, you're stating that you would target a maximum of 80 decibels at the stage area. That's what your conclusions read here. I'm concerned that nobody with a professional background here who understands noise has evaluated this. And at the same time, your neighbors have not had a chance to weigh in about it. So I don't think you should have a 2-month trial. I mean, that's half the summer. We'll be moving into the end of the summer by that time. I really think that in light of the fact that you haven't come back with an analysis, other than the fact that this says analysis, I don't know what that means. It would be very hard for me to vote to approve this at this point. Sorry.
And with all due respect, do you think it's fair that we should spend $7,000 to $10,000 for a report like that too?
No, I don't think that's fair.
That's a lot for a small business like ours.
I think there are conflicting issues about fairness here. Of course, that's not fair. I wish you could do it for free and get whatever you needed to remediate the space for free as well. Or you had some donor in town that would do that for you. But on the other hand, there are people who are having problems with us. And they're not here. They have not been at this test to understand what the ramifications.
They had the option to be
We
there,
we invited them.
I understand, but they weren't there. Okay.
but they were well informed and had the option to be there and chose not to. So I think that that's kind of like, we were doing every single thing that we tried to hit all the points from what you guys had asked us.
Well, you
The
didn't
last
you
time.
didn't hit the point that I asked for at all.
Well, I mean, there are all kinds of things with like apps and everything that are legitimate apps, just like they're, trying to figure out the percentage of incline, like the last applicant or whatever, talking about there's apps to use it. I mean, there are things to take into consideration that we use to try to alleviate the situation. We tried to deal with it with the other people, but they chose not to show up. We're choosing to take the time. We're trying to do all these things, but they're not showing up for it. I mean, we're trying to do what it is and make the effort because we're trying to change the way it was last year. And I think that that's where we're also, there were problems from before, and these are things that are not being seen where, everybody's going to remember the bad things. They're not going to remember and we're trying to change that. And now we're going to move forward and get it to the point where all the neighbors and everybody else can see that we are trying to do that. We've opted to bring them in on it. And if they choose not to show up, that we can't force them to.
Okay.
Commissioner Turner?
Okay, Mr. Turner, Mr. Knowles in the room is going to ask some questions, and then you, and then I'd like to take some public comment, and then we'll figure out what to do. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I don't have any specific comments. I know we've talked a lot about the technicalities and of, neighbors. So I live on the top of Richmond Hill, and I have he's now 2. He was 1.5 last summer. And I don't know if I was in some sound vortex, but when I would try to go to bed, I could hear the music on Friday nights, Saturday nights, every weekend. And it woke him up a few times, not often, a few times. I tried to take out my trash. And so I don't know. I'm all for music. I think music is great for the community. I think it livens things up. But we heard it. And we're at the top of Richmond Hill Road, and that's a good 3/4 of a mile away. So I have trouble in any of these recommendations that I've heard on a trial basis of 2 nights a week to begin with. All right, maybe you're going to change it, and I applaud you guys for taking, efforts and coming here and saying that you're going to change it. But 2 nights a week is kind of a lot to begin, and maybe there's some way to do it for, once every 2 weeks for 2 months or 3 months, and if it works, and if there's some report that is measured that we can see, and you come back in a reasonable amount of time and you put that together. But I heard it. So, and I can't imagine the people who live much closer. I read some of the letters of you going out on your patio and, hearing, Journey and Bob Seger cover, every, weekend on your Friday and your Saturday. And those are the 2 nights that you're, able to be outside in the summer. So I'm the 2 nights a week, whenever, or if it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, it just seems like a lot initially coming off of, what last year was. But that's just my comment.
Mr. Turner?
Yes, as part of the application, you submitted a floor plan and a site plan it looks like it's a hand sketch. It does not meet our criteria. It's not to scale. It's very difficult to understand exactly what you are proposing. I would suggest that you find a draftsman and put this space to the actual scale that it is, should be. And if those round circles are tables, you should call them out as tables. And are there chairs around them? And, help us better understand what you are proposing in this space. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, let's take a pause on our comments for a moment and see if we have anybody from the public that wants to speak, and then we'll figure out what we're gonna do and go from there. Are you here to speak on this application? Okay.
Is it just me? Is anybody on Zoom? There might be, but we can start with in person.
Yeah, we'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa McManus. This is my first planning and zoning. That wall thing got electric, didn't it, at the end there? Oh my God. I was on the edge of my seat. I am here to speak in support of allowing this 2 days a week from 7 to 10 live music at the White Buffalo. I also have read all the emails that got sent in, both for and against. And Mr. Engel, I kind of agree with you. There's a lot of moving pieces and a lot being brought up, both for and against this permit. It's my opinion that a lot of it is spurious to the special permit. I think it's irrelevant. I think it's a little bit of a red herring to be talking about taking pictures of chalk drawings in an alleyway. I'm not sure what that has to do with 7 to 10 on a Saturday night, and the volume of music that's going on there. I can tell you over the past few months that Rich and Chris have done a lot and made a lot of changes to ensure that at all times that outdoor space is properly signed, is properly demarcated. I can also tell you that there are a number of people coming and going through the alleyway, walking down those stairs, stopping to talk to their friends on one side. They're moving through, folks are having a drink, people are coming in and out. And I'm not entirely sure at what point and where Rich and Chris's responsibility does end to enforce anything on any part that they have specifically been told to demarcate as not part of their outdoor patio, right? It's either their problem or it's not their problem, but I don't think it's fair and reasonable to expect it to be a little bit of both. Loosening up a little bit, like, can we agree that live music is fun and we like it? It brings vibrancy, it brings culture, it brings commerce to downtown New Canaan. There is nothing really like it in New Canaan right now. This is a gap. I think White Buffalo fills a significant gap in both that it is family friendly, that it has sort of active dynamic outdoor space, that outdoor space is large. I can tell you I drove past Spiga on my way here and there wasn't an ounce of safety, of barriers, of anything demarcating what Spiga is using as their outdoor dining space. Those are kids that are running right out onto South Avenue. That's not a safe, family-friendly place, to be having any kind of entertainment. There is nothing like White Buffalo that we have in this town. As far as the noise, which I think is a perfectly reasonable complaint, let's talk about 2 nights, 22 dozen nights here. I don't know if anybody else remembers last September. It rained every single weekend. I have a friend who's a wedding photographer, so I was keeping track of that. Let's say that 24 comes down to 18. We can assume that whatever number is decided upon by the commission, there's going to be a haircut that is due to weather. Even 18 nights is 5% of the nights this year. It's 5% of the nights this year from 7 to 10 that there's some music, that there's some volume. I can tell you more of my time is interrupted by gas-powered leaf blowers and gas-powered weed whackers that my neighbors, landscapers are employing. I wish those landscapers had sound engineers who could literally set a decibel level on an amp that would ensure that, that those tools were kept to a certain reasonable volume. They don't. I really would wish that those tools played music and didn't make weed whacking sounds, but they also don't. At its core, I think Rich and Chris are good neighbors. I think they're trying to be good neighbors. I think they've demonstrated nothing but neighborly intent. And I'm not entirely sure how much can be expected in a one-way conversation. They're doing their best to fill the gap a gap that I think this town really lacks. And denying the request based on past ownership, denying the request based on sort of these far-fetched, spurious concerns of kids scooting off sort of, you know, into the ether, would deprive the entire town of the sort of the joy that safe live music would bring.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to speak on this application? If so, and if you're on Zoom, you can raise your little Zoom hand. Okay, doesn't appear.
Address that.
Yep, just,
If only you want to go there.
well, I'd like to try and figure out what we're gonna do. So is it gonna help us do that?
Yeah, I think that you're right. We have to, and I think you made some of my points, that some of the photos we saw of kids scootering and chalk may or may not be relevant to the application. And so that's why I really want to, so to your point, what are we going to do? I'd really like to define the problem, agree on what it is that we regard to be a problem and what the standard's going to be before we just vote on the application. If we don't believe that the applicant is responsible for some of the safety things that have been, you know, I do believe safety is part of this. She calls it spurious, but I believe that the pictures of the kids were brought to our attention because the neighbors said, you know, is this a safe environment? We have to ask ourselves, is that relevant to the application? So that's what I wanted to address within her remarks. When she says spurious, I say, I don't know, maybe safety is our responsibility.
So just one thing to keep in mind that I don't know if it's been mentioned before, but you have the stairwell coming down from Park Street. And so that access way, you know, is, I believe it's owned, it may be owned by the Francos and as well by White Buffalo's landlords, but there is a pedestrian easement that goes through the whole access way from Park Street stairwell through the access way. So, you know, as the commission determines what their role is in regulating safety, pedestrians do have a right to be in that access way, which may or may not complicate matters.
Right. And vehicles have a right to be in that access way and
correct
dining. One question I'll ask you, and then I will try and figure out what we're gonna do. You don't control the area where you want to put the tables and where you want to rope off the space for the music. You don't control that 24/7. You're only able to
We are
rope it
only-
off after 5 p.m.
After, yeah, once the SIGs park there, they own like all those spots right there that we use.
Okay.
They leave, they leave between 4:30 and 5. So we have it from 5 p.m. on during the week and then all day on Saturday and Sunday.
So that prevents you from doing any sort of a more permanent
We-
installation
that's-
of a defined
We
patio
everything
space.
has to, we take it, we remove it, we put it all out, we remove it, it all has to come down. So that's, I mean, we're very limited compared to everybody else and we lose out 5 days a week, all day long.
Right. All right, commissioners, so let's figure out how we want to work this one. I mean, there's three options, as there always are. We could just say we want to approve it and we can work towards that effort tonight. We could say we might want to approve it and we need some more information and give these guys some marching orders for what we want them to come back with. And I've heard some of those ideas, but we'd have to kind of get more succinct with that. Or if this is just a hard no, again, like the last one, I don't want to waste everyone's time, including our own, debating what decibel limit if ultimately everyone sitting on this table right now is a no. Let's not, you know. let's not do
Or
that.
the applicant can ask us to continue it.
I'm not
and
pulling it.
You're not pulling it.
No.
So you want a decision tonight?
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, I have a suggestion.
Yes.
You said before, a sort of a 2-month test. Let's assume we thought that was a good idea and the first group failed it. Okay, doesn't mean they're going to. So we gotta new people in charge, maybe they will do better. So I would suggest that they would have one night a week for 2 months, acoustic only, which is a lower level anyway. So if they fail that, they're certainly going to fail amplified. And so we see how that goes. If that works, we reevaluate it as far as more nights as well as potential amplification. Maybe some of the time, maybe every night, maybe it's just once a month or something, but we see where that is. So the lowest barriers, if they fail the management and fail acoustic, that's a hard fail in my book. And then we just say, sorry, it's just not working out. I also will note that in particular in this area, you're in a well, and that creates an amplification chamber. And I think this is why other people can hear it. So it's not just what you hear right there, but it tends to travel. It's sort of like you're in one of those domes where you whisper and you can hear someone on the side. You got to think
I
about
hear
the
you.
venue is not working for you.
When you
I'll just say
whisper,
that
he
as
hears
far
it
as
on
that.
Richmond Hill.
It's not working for you.
So does my son.
I don't disagree with that.
That ship has
We-
sailed.
it's all brick wall. Everything is
So
echoing
I
around.
would just challenge, what does it works or it doesn't mean? Are we measuring it based on number of complaints received or not received by the neighbors? Is it
That's
based
fair.
on decibel levels? So just something, if this is the path you're going to go down, just, I think you need to be clear on what a success is and what a failure is.
So,
Hold on, Mr. Benton had his hand and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Swarmo.
so if I could, I think what I would propose on this one is, I do think it's good for the town. But it has to be agreeable for all the neighbors around. I think 2 live events is a lot right now during a probational period. I don't think just acoustic would solve the problem because we're not going to know how they're going to handle it when it's amplified. So if it's one night amplified, one night not, you can look at that. I do think the responsibility has to be on the White Buffalo. It can't be them responding. So whether it's financial penalties to the band, or whether it's to the restaurant, or we pull things, there has to be enforcement by the White Buffalo, not responsive. The barriers, I do have an issue with the barriers, because you describe it as people there. That's not my issue. My issue is the people with drinks. When you have a nice band there, they're overflowing in the other areas. And then you have cars that literally are trying to push people away to get out. If you can control that, so even if it's just, there's no one with White Buffalo drinks outside of the barriers, I think that's fine. But that has to be enforced. That'd be mine.
If we offered to have like security, higher security for that night to keep people, would that work?
However it's done,
Yeah.
I just think anybody with a White Buffalo drink needs to be inside the ropes.
How do they provide documentation to us that that was successful?
I think the enforcement is you bring everybody back, and if anybody in the town wants to come for a public hearing, we can determine whether or not we renew it or not.
Vox
Oh, it is.
populi.
What's that?
I'll answer your question.
Well, I was actually.
You're next.
Yes. Well, I agree with a lot of the things that have been said. I think the 2 gentlemen have come here with good intentions and trying to solve a problem that is has a lot of unfairness to it, to a lot of different folks who have different points of view. And I think live music is great. If you go to the Gates, that's another restaurant in town that has live music. They have the ability to do it inside and not outside, so they don't disturb anybody else. But Saturday nights at the Gates is one of the best places in town. I would propose that we allow them to do what they've asked for until our next meeting. Two nights a week, monitoring it the way they need to monitor it. But at the next meeting, I think we should have a public notice that anybody with complaints about this can come back to us and voice their complaints. And this approval will be only good to that point, and it would have to be reapproved at our next.
You're referring to June.
Yes.
Which we already have a lot on the agenda, and we just asked the other application to come back.
Yeah, we'll only be here for 25 hours on that night.
Right.
It can't be worse than the wall one.
Leap year day.
But I mean,
Oh, you've not been here then. You get way worse in the wall one.
No, the wall one was easy.
Oh,
I would I would say this, it's interesting you mentioned Gates. I like to dance and my wife likes to dance, but we are unable, but she has a problem when the music is too loud, it affects her heartbeat. And we are unable to go to Gates because it's a very small enclosed area, and the noise is too much to prevent her from having heart symptoms. So we're unable to go to Gates, and we certainly, my wife and I would really like to have a place to go dance on the weekends. So that's just a personal insight on this. I do
We'll keep
think
an area roped off for you. Promise.
Oh, I think we should keep him roped off. No, I agree with you. I actually, the indoor loud music affects most people's heartbeats, most of them in a positive manner and some in a negative manner. So it's obviously not for you, but I would love to test this out, just the way they proposed it, but for a limited amount of time. So we can see who comes back with what. Maybe there will be no complaints, at that point, or there might be something that we need to suggest as a modification.
I can't, I mean, I can't support, I can do a test run, but 2 nights a week, it was, and I know last summer was different. It was every Friday, every Saturday. I could hear it when I threw out my trash at 8:45. I could hear it when I tried to go to sleep at 10 o'clock. I could do one night, and I think that would maybe a Saturday and a Friday, and you'll get the crowds and people go, and it'll still be fun, amplified music, and see if it works. And then whether it be the June hearing or the July hearing, yeah, I feel like the July hearing might even be better because that gives 8 weeks.
I understand
That's a
what
better
you're saying.
sample size.
Measuring the music, I understand what you were saying, how loud it was. And I assure you, when we adjusted the direction of the speakers and the level, it made a huge difference. And I completely understand what you're saying. It was very loud when we had it at its loudest point, and it made a big difference with all, like, I walked around the entire residential area personally, and I assure you.
Yeah.
That's all I can.
No, I appreciate that, but I think there needs to be a test, right? We need to say, okay, you say you're going to do it, and I believe you, and
I agree, yeah.
there's a test, and then we have an evaluative process, and then you come back in July and you say, look, and the issue is, as everybody's saying, is what's the standard? What do we judge it on? Is it complaints? Is it, is it a decibel level? Who's the independent study? You're going to pay $10,000. It sounds like you're probably not to have a report and provide us with a report. But I think to just say, let's do 2 nights a week and then let's see what happens. I just because I'm somebody who hears it, I think we could try one and then, figure out, I guess, amongst us what that,
So I hear
barometer is.
several commissioners talking about a trial run, which sounds to me then like we are potentially going to close this application tonight and talk about what that trial run would look like in terms of a motion. Is there anybody who has a different view on that? That's not what your hand was for.
I was going to suggest a framework.
Oh, okay. Sarah, thoughts on a trial run? Can we do that?
So we can. This was not on my list of things to research before this meeting, so I don't know specifically the legal mechanism for whether they technically need to reapply again for a special permit, because there aren't temporary special permits. So
Do
I'm
we have
wary of.
something that allows
Can you term
temporary
limit it?
events? No, we have a regulation that, like, we used to approve the summer theater for, just the summer, that they could have X
So
number
those
of
were
show-
conditions of approval.
But it wasn't any sort of temporary, okay.
No, so
It was,
yeah. So
because it would
so
come
what
back to us
I'm
every year. It was every year that the summer theater would come and we would approve just for that summer. But
okay.
Maybe
So
Or the basketball schedule at Grace Farms, which would keep.
but again,
are
that's
there
a
terms on
condition of
special permits?
approval. That's a condition of Grace Farm special permit approval, and that's under the assumption that you were okay with the activity. But this is, you don't know if you're okay with the activity. So more what I'm getting at is I'm wary of having them come for June because I may talk with our attorney tomorrow, and they may say they do need to reapply for a special permit, and then they can't get on the June agenda then. So I would, whether they do or don't, I would recommend July.
July at the earliest.
We
And do-
approved them with an expiration date in the past.
Correct, and then they had to reapply for a special
That's
permit.
what we would do now, right?
Yes, so again,
Guess we would follow the same process. we
okay,
did
so
in the
then
past.
they would have to reapply.
We'd have to
Or-
go through the whole thing, like all the same
I
like
think you're-
paperwork, or
This cycle
just.
In the past, they came to us in July and then they came back in October, so there was enough time on the calendar for them to get back on the docket to be before us.
So I mean, I
I
guess
just wanted to-
actually,
I
so
just
sorry,
wanted to be
I'm
clear.
just one other thing. I'm thinking out loud now, thinking back to October. I may have misspoke. In October, it may have been a request that they come back to the commission, and then when they did, you revoked the special permit. So they didn't reapply in October. So I guess you would have to shape this approval in a way that, test ran it through whatever date you chose, and then in theory, it would just, they would continue, or you would
It would
revoke.
expire unless renewed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I know you're dying to speak, Mr. Cassidy.
I don't know, dying may not be a relevant term, but what I'd recommend, right, is one night of music per weekend, 7 to 10. We don't care whether it's amplified or not amplified. It's on you to ensure that it's not higher than 85 decibels at the originating point, and it's good for 10 periods, one night a week for 10 weeks. That gives you enough time to file for a new permit. The amount of time it took you to fill out this permit couldn't have been that long. It does ignore the request that we made for a sound survey before, but I would just recommend that you try that. We could deny a new permit in 10 weeks if we get a lot of complaints. To Ms. McManus's point, the neighbors did show up in a big way tonight. They showed up because we don't normally get that many letters, pro or con. Many of them were quite relevant. So I don't have to agree with your perspective, but I'm trying to come up with a way that might work. That would allow you to communicate to your neighbors in a very specific email that says, this is what we got approval to do. It's going to give you an opportunity to come again, right? I mean, I think, Sarah, that works within the constraints.
This is Commissioner Chris. I hear you, Commissioner Cassavant, but ultimately it's going to be a self-certification that it is a certain decibel level. There's no third party who's going to be measuring it. And the third party certification in effect is what neighbors have to say about the experience, how well it's been managed, and what they're hearing literally.
So
Ultimately, I think that's what it's going to boil down to.
toward that end, it would help me if you document this really well. Since you're going to be self-certifying, it would be really great if when you came back, I mean, we're geeks for data. And if you said event one was an acoustic guitar and it was 85 decibels at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it was measured at 7, 8, 9, and 10. Here are photos from the evening. So we could see that 50 people were there.
Question.
25, hold on.
Sorry.
25 people were there because I only have 3 little bitty screenshots from somebody's iPhone that shows a couple of examples of how the ropes, but I would really like to see how event 1, 2, a small, medium, and large, acoustic and electronic. I'd like to see more evidence. So you're getting a trial here. My only suggestion is make the most of it and document the heck out of it so that when you come back, we have a record that we can review and say, these neighbors are making what spurious, my new favorite word. These neighbors are spurious, or we're going to say, oh no, they're right. These people are, there's 100 people and this isn't what we had in mind, outside. We had 50 in mind. So I would love to see more documentation at the end of the trial in order to renew.
And so we can provide that. We have apps that can show the actual decibel level where we are on video, which I have.
You're going to
We-
exceed my
So
expectations.
we will
I know
provide
it.
videos that shows the decibel where we're standing while the band is playing. Does that, can we show that here? I
It's
don't
not
know.
just about decibels.
Yeah.
I'd even like to know whether this car traffic thing, is that a thing? How many cars come and when do they come? I'd like to know that because we've heard a lot about safety And I'm just wondering, is that a 1 car per evening kind of thing where the cars carve a path through the throng of people, or am I
Well,
just
after
imagining
6
that?
p.m., there's really only 1 car in
There's
that
one.
garage, and it's
That's
the
what I don't-
restaurant's
that's
car.
what I
right next
don't
to us.
know.
That's the problem is
It's
I
been
am
made
second
out to
show
be
it.
a big deal.
I understand what you're saying. It's, that's the problem is that there are a lot of different components because at certain times during the day, like, I mean, with the amount of people coming from like the lot, it's hard to distinguish between there's people that are there, people from the other spot, people walking through this car that's pulling in. Cause a lot of times people are trying to park back there because there's no parking on Elm Street. All these cars are pulling in that don't belong back there.
And not your problem.
And that's yeah, but I mean, maybe if, there's never been signs put up by the owners of the buildings, private parking lot, like up front. There's only the ones on the wall or whatever. So there's a lot of different things that can be done, but it's almost like not just us, like, we're trying to do what we can for just our area, but other things can be done. So I understand what you're saying, and that's fine. Like, we can try to document as much as we can, and that's fine. But
It'll help your case.
Yeah.
All right, commissioners, it sounds to me like we have a direction, so if you guys are comfortable, we could go ahead and close this. I just want to make sure that as we go into deliberation of this application, we don't have additional questions that come up that we haven't gotten answers from. So I need you to think right now. I mean, it sounds like we're kind of on the same page about where we're going, but if there's anything else you need from these guys, let's do it before we close that.
I like your idea of having security out there. And I would like, and it hasn't been addressed, but I'd like you to think about the trash question. Franco says that he has to pick up the trash after your events, and maybe it's not because of your events. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I would come up with a strategy for that, so that doesn't become part of the issue, because it's just a greater density, greater load on the downtown, and somebody has to pick up the trash, and so we got to
there's
figure
a lot
that
of
out
people
too.
who come walking through. I mean, I see pizza boxes left that we don't even serve that. Like, it's
Just for the record, he's the most anal person I've ever met in my life. and
there's
is-
a lot of things that like that because people, it is a pass through and people just drop stuff all the time. I mean,
But yes, I get.
that's something we'd have to work on with him and whoever else, like somebody else is gonna have to do it along with us.
Okay. So commissioners, are we ready to close this application and move on?
Yes.
All right. You can stick around. We will deliberate on this in just a moment, but as a formality, this application is closed and,
To take a break.
okay, we're going to move into deliberation, which is the next item on our agenda. We'll take a 5-minute bathroom break and we'll make a decision on this. So, everybody on Zoom? I don't know why it's buzzing like that. We are back and we are on item number 4 on our agenda, which is deliberation of any possible action on a closed public hearing item. And the only action we have, because we continued 672 Oak Ridge, is the 72 Park Street application for the White Buffalo. So commissioners, let's just try and pick up where we left off. We batted around some ideas. Let's see what I have written down. We're trying to fix that squeaking noise. So I don't think we're all on the same page yet, but the last thing I had written down was 1 night a week on a weekend for 10 weeks, no higher than 85 decibels.
I had heard proposals on acoustic, and I had heard them that that wouldn't be an adequate test. So there were 2 different approaches.
Right,
Can
okay.
we,
So
can we
let's-
just take each point and we'll just debate each one? I think the first one is how long of a duration we want.
You
which
mean
I-
how long's the trial period?
Yeah, which I
Okay.
think 10 weeks, does anybody have an issue with 10 weeks?
I do.
Okay.
Too long. I say 6, starting next weekend, so you get Memorial Day and you get the 4th of July weekend.
Well, but we can't, then we'd have to take it up in June and we don't have time.
It goes into
Can we,
July.
instead of picking weeks, could we clarify what meeting you want them to come back
at?
to?
That makes sense.
Instead of weeks,
Just end of July,
The July meeting.
July regular meeting.
July
Let's
regular
just-
meeting.
Okay.
I think we should let them have their once a week event until we are able to hear them again. And I don't think we're able to hear them again until July.
Okay. So is everyone in agreement that the duration is through the July meeting? And
Yes.
they will come back at that time.
Yes.
All right. Are we in agreement that one night a week?
Which night?
Well, I was gonna go there,
Yeah,
but Mr. Benton does not
I,
agree.
I mean, I still think the difference between amplified music and acoustic music.
You want to go there first?
So I think one night a week amplified's right, but I don't have any issue with acoustic. And the way they describe it as a solo, to me, that would be, if you're gonna do a weekend, you have one night acoustic, one night amplified, I have no problem with that.
I totally agree with what is being proposed right now.
Okay, so
Krista, this is Fred Tufts. Can you hear me?
yes, who are you, Mr. Tufts? And we're deliberating now, so.
I know you are, and unfortunately, I've been trying to get in, you know, for multiple, for at least a half hour. Can I make
Okay,
a couple, can I make a
I'm
couple?
sorry, I cannot let you make comments after this application's been closed and we're deliberating, so I'm terribly sorry that you had that situation, but it's not something we can
It was
accommodate.
frustrating. It was
I
frustrating. I'd only tell you that no one ever
I
contacted.
apologize, but we can't take any more comment now because we're in
right,
deliberations.
just-
So,
Just let John Engel know, no one ever contacted us.
okay,
And-
I just said that we cannot take any more comment.
All
Can we
right,
please
I got
mute
it.
the gentleman?
Krista, thank you very much.
Is everyone on mute other than the people who need to be deliberating right now? I mean, the people in the room don't have to be on mute. Okay, so back to where we were, come back into July meeting, one night a week amplified. Are we saying unlimited acoustic or we just don't care?
No, I was saying one live, one acoustic.
Okay. One amplified, one acoustic. Do they need to be on the weekends or Thursday through Sunday or something like that? Or do we not care?
I would be okay with Thursday through Sunday.
Okay,
Though I, for the amplified, I would say it should be either Friday or Saturday.
okay. Amplified. Friday, Saturday. Acoustic can be anytime, Thursday through Sunday. All right. Then we had a criteria about the decibel level, 85 decibels max.
That's not what they say. They're asking for 80.
They're asking for 80.
I thought they said 85. No. Look at their request. It's last page.
Okay.
Under conclusions, says they're asking for 80. And there's actually a big difference between 80 and 85.
Okay.
And it's 80 at the
stage.
At the stage.
Yeah.
Because that's going to allow us to have a sense of whether this works or not, and if the evidence will be clear.
Commissioner Chris, when you say at the stage, exactly what do you mean at the stage? You're standing 1 foot in front, 10 feet, 5 feet on the stage?
On the stage.
At the stage is on the stage.
Okay, so you're on the stage. Okay.
What, it's Commissioner Turner, what if the amplified music, the amplifier itself is not on the stage, in front of it or in another location?
Adjacent to the speaker?
That makes sense.
Okay.
And the stage.
Yeah. All right, we had some conversation about the applicant having security bouncers, some sort of staff along the perimeter, at least one person. Is that something we want to ask for?
I mean, I brought that up. I think it's okay if they self-police it, but they just have to be aware they have to keep
Okay,
the drinkers inside the fence.
so we'll leave that to them. We,
Although, I think it's going to be important that there be somebody designated. If they're not going to hire somebody who's,
I agree with that.
if I want to complain if I want to come down from, from Richmond Hill, I want to know that there's somebody who's responsible for this on site, who's obvious to me who's responsible that I can say, hey, turn down the music, or hey, I have a situation, or hey, I can't get my car out. So there should be somebody designated, somebody responsible. I don't know whether we're calling that security or the person in charge, but it's going to have to be clear who that is.
Okay, so somebody is assigned on site to take any complaints. that
Yeah,
are made.
just they need to have a
Okay.
event
Outside
captain
manager.
or security, event captain, security, bouncer, whatever you want to call it. Because in October, they said, yeah, no problem. Come on in, and tell me. I'm the manager, and, tell me if you want me to turn it down. And so it was like you'd have to go find the manager, or somebody inside. That didn't work for me.
Okay. Anything else about the actual events themselves that we would like to put conditions on?
No, I think that's good, and we see what happens, and then we evaluate in 2 months. And if people complain and they submit letters, then we know, it didn't work, and if they don't, then it worked, and we move forward.
So to Mr. Engel's point about reporting, should we tell them now what information exactly we want them to come back to us to with any sort of reporting? Or I know you gave them some ideas. Sarah wants to say something.
So I was gonna say, I highly recommend that, just, so from the get-go, you're getting the information that you want, and, maybe it doesn't work the first night and then they change what they do later on, so you have the whole scale of, what the experiment led to.
Okay, so do you guys have thoughts on what type of data you would want to see when they come back to us in July about when these events were, how they went, what they included, that type of thing?
This is Commissioner Chris. I would have two. One would be 3 readings per event at the place designated with recording, photo or video of a decibel meter showing where the person is standing and what the reading is while it's being played. Also that any and all neighbor contact would be logged.
Okay.
Who talked to you, at what point, at when, names of the people involved and so forth, so that that will be put in the record.
Okay.
In terms of reporting, I find it less important, though it is important, that they report on what they've done, their activities, and what the results are. But it's more important to know what the neighbors are thinking. I think we need a mechanism for that. Is there a way to inform their neighbors in some kind of blanket format that this test is happening, and that we will be having a meeting in July, whatever the date is, and to determine the results of what we've proposed here?
Hence, that was my earlier suggestion, that the applicants send an email
Yeah.
to everybody, including a carbon to Sarah, that says, by the way, assuming that we
Carbon?
approve
Do
this.
we still use
Carbon
carbon?
copy, yeah, there we
Do
go.
we?
But
What
that
is
says clearly, because we heard several times tonight, people say, I didn't get me. Send an email, carbon copy the planner, and say, this is what we have, and we're going back in July, and we look forward to a successful conclusion.
So who are they required to send this email to? And
So to me, Alan, I don't think that we need to specify who they do. If they really want to make this work, they're going to figure out who they need to talk to. The people who wrote letters,
okay,
their immediate abutters, right? Maybe the new Canaanite, I'm not sure. But
Maybe some of their fans.
I assume it's the impetus should be on the applicant to say, if I really want to make this work.
I think we need to give them a guideline, but I mean, you just did give them a guideline.
I think so.
And I would use that as a guideline.
I have a different guideline. I would say inform the Chamber of Commerce, which has essentially most people in town. And with the request that that be shared, and they would also, anyone who isn't a butter gets a direct note and it's copied to Sarah. Similarly, we have notice if you have an application, you have to tell it butters, those are butters, and then anyone who may be down the street or in Richmond Hill, we get that through the Chamber of Commerce, which I think will try to make this available, I would hope, though we can't force them.
I think important for me is, and I like the idea of the log, but I think the point of the log should be when you send the letter out, one way of communicating, either text or cell phone, right? So there's a single point of engagement. If there is a complaint, when it's logged, there should take a reading and just figure out what the decimal level is. Let's figure out if people are complaining over something that's a legit argument or if they're just making noise. So if the idea is we have a log and at the time of the log, it's who's calling and what was the decimal level at that time, we're gonna have a lot more information to work from in
So-
July.
So Commissioner, what you're suggesting is, let's say, there are 3 times a night, period. If you get a complaint, you have to
You have to
retest
You
at
have to
that point.
retest it and
Okay.
file it with that log, so we know.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. I like it.
I agree. I just don't think if the complaint, sometimes it might not come into the next day. Obviously, you can't measure it. Then you'd have the log from the night before, but it's not always going to have real-time data to go
But we'll
with it.
have his 3
Yeah,
per
we'll have
night
the
to
3 from the night
assess.
before, yeah.
But if so, it will also learn pretty quick if someone's making noise and it's not fully justified, or maybe it is fully justified. Maybe it's a neighbor in Richmond Hill that's like, it's too loud. It's like, okay. They can tune it right there and see if it addresses it. And that'll help us make a decision in July.
All right. Other things I heard.
Love the log, including, no cars left or 1 car left and only hit 2 people on the way out or whatever it is. But, just so we have an idea of things that are happening that neighbors have addressed in the past and if they're still happening.
Okay. All right, so it sounds to me like the reporting's gonna include the night of the event, the type of music that was being held, and 3 recordings of the decibels during that event. Whether any cars came in and out of the alley during that time frame, and then there would also be a log of neighbor contact or complaints. And if the complaint is during the hours of the music, then you would go back and log the decibels again when the complaint comes in. Does that sound like what we've just said?
I think honestly, we've laid out a pretty good framework. The applicants have an enormous impetus to make this work. They should be able to figure out the specifics. We don't need to dictate the form, I think.
I agree.
All right. Anything else or?
So just to clarify that won't be a condition then, that this whole log, like the log that is that what you were just suggesting, Commissioner Cassavant?
What I'm suggesting is that the communication to neighbor or to concerned parties be required. I don't need to specify the form of that. I don't need to build a framework on it. We've made a bunch of suggestions. I just don't think we should be the documentary police because, hopefully this will all work and people say, hey, this is wonderful, right? Or we won't have complaints.
Well, I think the log needs to be provided, right? I think we need to get
Yeah.
that in advance of our July hearing.
Yeah, no, that's correct. We're going to
Okay.
get the log of the decibels
Right.
during the event, yes.
That's a condition of the special
Yes,
permit
okay.
is that
Yeah.
when they go for the renewal.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else before we ask for a motion? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. All right. Do I have a motion on this application?
I'll move we approve the special permit with the conditions that you are just going to read out to us.
Just for the record, could you read off those conditions
All
so
right.
it's clear on the record?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so the conditions are that the applicant will be coming back at the July regular meeting. Until then, we approve them for 1 night of amplified music, either a Friday or Saturday night a week, and 1 night of acoustic music, anytime Thursday through Sunday during a week. During the event, the music can't be higher than 80 decibels, either at the stage or adjacent to the speaker. There needs to be somebody assigned on site to handle any complaints that arise, and neighbors need to be notified of this trial period and that the applicant's coming back in July. And the applicant also needs to keep a log of data that will be provided to us prior to the July meeting, which includes the night, the type of music, and 3 decibel readings during the event, how many cars came in and out of the alley, and any neighbor complaints or contact that was had regarding that event.
That is my motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we require any additional discussion on this special permit criteria? I'll just say that I think that, like all our applications, this is a balancing act, that our POCD probably, I mean, I know it does encourage a lively downtown environment, and I think that's one piece that we're trying to reach, but also it encourages, you know, livability and making this a town that works for the neighbors and everybody in it. So as always, we're trying to balance those two things.
Yeah, well said.
All right, let's go for a vote. Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
Mr. Cassavant,
Yes.
Mr. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Knag,
Yes.
Mr. Swerdlow,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
and Mr. Knowles.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Okay. So that is that. Sarah, item number 5 is administrative actions.
I have none tonight.
Okay. Item number 6, we have 3 different meetings that we have meeting minutes to approve. We can do those collectively, correct? All right. Does anyone have any proposed changes to any of the meeting minutes listed here? They're April 24th, April 30th special meeting, and April 30th regular meeting. Okay. If not, do I have someone who wants to move to approve those minutes?
So move.
All right. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good night.